Hello and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Factory. I am thrilled to have Matthew Carauddo on board. Welcome aboard.
Hey, thanks for having me, Michael. I really appreciate it, and it's good to be here.
Matthew is the mastermind behind the Diamond Dragon series. 5 books out so far. I believe there are 6 set for launch, if I have that correctly. Your 5th book is coming out the winter solstice.
That's right.
And it seems you do launches that correlate with the seasons, and I'm sure that has deeper meaning throughout your series. And that's one of many reasons I'm thrilled to have you on. You are a renaissance man of creativity and experience, from what I can tell. So you do your own writing, editing, book covers, video. You have a background in voiceover, in production. You're a martial artist. You're a fencer. You have been on TV and in movies as a stunt guy. We have seen you as a Jedi Knight. As a Jedi Knight, I believe. I am talking to, folks, an actual Jedi Knight. So can you introduce yourself a little bit to the audience and give it a flavor of how it all fits into the context of writing awesome fantasy? Because after everything you've done, including the great things you're doing now, you're dedicating a huge amount of your time, resources, and energy to the Diamond Dragon series. Tie a bow on it. How did it all come to this, as they say in the movie trailers?
Well, thanks, Michael. That's quite an illustrious intro, and I
Dun,
will.
dun, 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 dun. You probably do it better. You could actually do your own voiceover as an
In
intro.
a world, no. Yeah, well, I appreciate.
Matthew Carauddo.
Well, I appreciate the intro. I just want to clear some things up. I'm not a Hollywood guy. I've never been in any, big Hollywood films or anything like that. And you might find that in some cases too, like with certain actors or just performers in general, that it's like not everybody goes into that world. It's sort of like if you were to become a millionaire or billionaire, it's like there are those people out there, but they're not necessarily common. But it doesn't mean that there aren't other people who do what they do and just don't have that notoriety or that level of financial success, whatever. But I mean, it makes people should make no mistake that my background is 30 plus years, and I'm kind of being generous with that in production in general, mostly live production. And what does that mean when I say that? I mean, acting, directing, singing. In some cases, I did quite a bit of singing, even though I wasn't a super hyper pro. I'm not Adele or something like that. And fight choreography. I did that was a huge part of my background, which we can get into if we want. Sound design. I designed over 9,000 sounds. I sometimes say it's over 9,000. What 9,000? There's no way that can be right, Vegeta.
Yeah. So if you're not a literal Jedi Knight, you're definitely a figurative one, right? And
Well,
I've seen you in the robes in all of
and getting to
your
that,
media. You're in
because
the
the
robes.
way
You are waving a lightsaber. Don't deny
yeah,
it.
and getting to that, the way that you said it, it's like, so no, I was not in any of the Star Wars films. But what basically happened, and I'll try to sum this up quickly, unless you want to ask any other questions about it, is at one point I was just sort of inspired. I don't know how to explain it without going into way too much detail, to say, hey, I wonder what it would be like. And this is around 2005. What would it be like to see like a significantly powerful and very robust live lightsaber battle on stage with even just hints of a story and characterizations and things. And I was thinking, look, this better not be that long. I don't see, how we're going to do this, but I would like to try that. And can I do it with volunteers and teach them sort of my own saber combat system and lean into my saber fencing background. I was a competitive saber fencer for many years. I had my share of golds and silvers and bronzes and blah, blah, blah. Nothing Olympic, just to be clear for listeners and viewers. But I mean, I did the work. I studied at an academy and I trained, I taught
And once
students
again,
of.
I've seen you flipping around on
Oh,
your
right. That's a
videos
different thing.
and,
That's not
and
fencing.
website.
Right. That's right. That's a martial arts. That's something called tricking. Maybe just someone would say, "Was it acrobatics?" For certain. But anyway, again, long story short, around 2005, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this now. To tie this in with like YouTube for again listeners and viewers who are younger or whatever was brand new. YouTube was brand new at that moment. And so one of my cast members, who again I kind of cast the whole show and I choreographed and I taught them all. We were doing rehearsals. She just said, "Hey, Matthew, you should put this on YouTube." And what the hell is that? Like I don't know what that is. I'd not heard of it because it was so new. And she explained it, and I didn't really know that much. And I said, "Sure, whatever. I'll go to this link that you've sent me, and I'll just press some buttons and find out." Sure enough, months later, and again, this is long story short, I kind of uploaded. I don't think it was just the rehearsal footage. I think that was something and that nobody really saw. But I uploaded one of the performances, like the primary performance. Went to bed, woke up the next day, and it's like 31,000 views. I'm like, what the hell is this? What is going on? Now, today, 31,000 views or whatever the number was is not that much. But back then, I was like, what is going on? Are you serious? So that was something. And then, sort of, what happened is that sort of catapulted me deeper into this community, which kind of revolved around these LED lightsaber props, which, again, to kind of, again, sum up, is these things were not common back then because at that moment, again, we're going 20 plus years back in time right now, you just couldn't make a very good, bright lightsaber that was durable, that would last with this, beating the living, pardon my French, crap out of it on stage or wherever, even just for fun. And so, again, moving forward in time, we were just making them better. I was helping to innovate with them in some ways.
Yeah,
I,
now I was just at LA Comic Con and they
right.
sell them, right? They have
Yeah.
they have lightsaber vendors and they have several of them. And they're a big ticket item, right? Everyone's waving them around. They're sophisticated.
Yeah.
They
At the
look
time, there
good.
really wasn't any vendors, aftermarket vendors. It was only you just get these toys in the stores. So, eventually that all kind of came to fruition. And I was sort of part of the underground movement that sort of pushed it forward. I remember I was one of the main ones who suggested lithium ion battery cells. They were the 18650s is what the models, and that's just the diameter and the length, 18 millimeters and 650 for the or for the length and the diameter. But anyway, the point being is, we're dealing with circuit boards and voltage and all sorts of different things. You got to wire these things up. Um, I, in some other interviews that I did, I kind of showed some of the electronics boards, that go into these things and how, you're soldering up switches and, auxiliary switches as well to turn it on, off, charging ports. I mean, it's kind of small extra LEDs that go into the hilt that flash and flicker and make it look, futuristic and fun, in addition to the primary LED or LED array that would drive the huge light that you would be seeing in the main blade of the weapon. So anyway, the point is, uh, there was a there was quite a rabbit hole to go down with all of that. But I did that, and in addition to these performances, I would teach classes not only to youth but adults as well. And at one point, again, I'm fast forwarding somewhere around, I want to say 2011, 12, I was able to start teaching classes at Google headquarters of all places. And that was sort of a fluke. I'm not going to go into all the details, but it was just interesting that someone approached me and said, "Hey, what would you think about teaching saber combat classes over here?" And I said, sure, like why not? And especially if people are enthusiastic and they realize that it's going to be not only a workout but an education, and look, it's not as easy as it looks, you know.
And just from a reader's vantage point, your Diamond Dragons do a lot of martial arts, right? So
Yeah.
you've integrated your martial arts knowledge and expertise into your characters. And there's awesome illustrations throughout your book too. So these books are a series of prose illustrations done by you, and they're fun to hold and read, right? You've got
Yeah.
digital versions of all of them, right? Except for the last one will be print only. Is that right?
Right, yeah. So people can, they could visit the website if they want to learn more, which is diamond-dragons.com. And again,
Yeah,
there's
we'll put
no
the link in the
obligations.
description. Right.
Yeah, I'm
Right.
not trying to tell anybody to do anything, but that way they
No,
can
but
visit.
this
There's
is
plenty
an
of,
opportunity for you to promote your series, talk about you, get people excited,
well,
meet the
sure. But,
author.
I am always like, just they can look at it, then they can find out if they say, oh, I want to learn more about this. There's plenty of video, I just call them, teasers or trailers, if you will, of each book. So people can look at those, and that gives sort of that, interesting and like exciting, ooh, wow, what's this? It gives you that mystery of what are all these about. In addition to that, I have these, the chapter artwork teaser videos, the cats, if you will. And those just sort of, glance through uh, a portion, I would say, of some of the artwork that's in all of the books. And there are, at this present moment, about 450 plus, I want to say, illustrations amidst the five books thus far. And you're correct that I will be publishing book five pretty much only in the print formats. So paperback, which will be grayscale, for the images, and then the hardcover, which is, all color, on the winter solstice of 2025. Of course, this is the end of this year, as of the time of this broadcast and whatnot. So yeah, like
That is
there's great stuff for people to
that's
go and
amazing.
visit.
And again, it's all you. You're a do-it-yourself kind of guy.
Well, to a
Do you
point,
use?
there are some others who were involved in this, and they're listed on the site. But primarily, like for example, if I were to have hired someone to do 100% of my illustrations, and if I had nothing to do with them, it would be ludicrously expensive and outside of my budget to do it fair, for people. And I like to pay all my artists fairly, if you will, quite fairly if I can. And in a lot of cases, I would say that some people were not even capable of doing what I needed to do anyway.
Yeah,
Because of,
collaboration is hard. It's hard. I did
sure.
the Super Santa series the last couple of years, which is an illustrated satirical novel. It's about
Hmm.
150,000 words and 180 illustrations. Last
Yeah,
season, we
that's a
broke it
lot.
up into three books. It was one ginormous phone book sized novel. And
Right.
I collaborated with an artist who also contributed to the storytelling and all that. And partnerships are difficult, right? We've got both our names. We got both our names on the cover, and
Even in addition to that, if we skip over all the like details of like, well, what about it's like, what about the coordination of schedules and timing? And people have lives, and then there's disasters that happen in people's lives that you can't predict. And sometimes there's conflict between, can I communicate this information to the other person? Are they communicating with? There's just like all these little hidden, I don't want to say roadblocks, but they can be. And so, yeah, it can be difficult to work with others. But right. So the point is that I like to work with as many people. I mean, my whole background was, like I said, in production. So I would direct teams. I'd be part of them where I was just the actor and not the director. So you learn you have to know what role you are. But yeah, I'm perfectly capable of doing that. I mean, I'll be honest with you. If I had a, even a $250,000 budget or something like that, I could easily bring together a team and just say, "Hey, let's coordinate X, Y, and Z," and we could get some great things done. But yeah, as you've probably become aware, um, it's quite a there's a hidden logistics, we might call it, right?
yeah, collaboration is difficult,
Yeah,
and really bringing your vision to light. There's no one who understands it as well as you do, and if you're gifted as an artist and you're able to pull it all together, then why not? The other
right,
example is bringing in a professional editor to take a look at your prose. Now, there's pros and cons for your prose. On the
right.
one hand, you do get an objective look, and if you're aiming for a particular target audience, there might be heightened sensitivities from that editor to appease an established audience who welcome science fiction, welcome fantasy in a particular format that'll make it more marketable naturally. And if you go your own way, then you have the luxury and freedom of being like Burger King. You know, it's your way. But at the same time, people might not understand where you're coming from. It doesn't fit an established framework. It's disruptive to the point they don't even really know what to do with it. So I think it's balancing act between having independence, creative freedom, your own
Mm-hmm.
vision, and creating something that people will understand and want to engage with.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really excellent point, and that is a very difficult concern for a lot of artists to approach, is to try to say, okay, well, I have this vision and I have this thing I want to do. I have a story, I have these characters, blah, 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 whatever you have, whatever your product is. But then uh, some people might say, look, if I just made my quick assessment, this will appeal to only 5% of the population of the entire planet, even if we can get them to see it. And then someone else might say, okay, let's go into a parallel world. And they're like, look, Bob, your project, I think this will appeal to 90% of the public if we can get in. So we're like talking on these different levels. However, you might have projects where you're like, this isn't really about making an appeal to the masses. It might be more about, this is a project that lives on its own in a certain, I don't want to just suddenly throw out names, but it was something I was mentioning to someone yesterday, Terry Gilliam style. You know, I don't know if you're familiar with Terry's work. Terry Gilliam.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Well,
Terry Gilliam, when he first started, was way left field, and now
that's what I'm saying. And like what I'm saying is,
well, that's Monty Python, and then it's its
right.
own. They've created their own subgenre, if
Yeah,
you
and to
will.
set the tone for some of your viewers, which I can only capture so many. If it, let's say they don't know who Terry Gilliam is and they don't want to look it up right now, I can mention the film 12 Monkeys, which was
Yeah,
starring Bruce Willis,
that's a
Brad
great
Pitt,
example
Madeline
of art
Stowe.
direction and a creative visual fabric,
Just
which
a
is
beautiful film.
kind of, maybe we could describe it as a steampunk, a
It's
creepy
a
kind of steampunk with satire and black
and
humor,
time
right?
travel, like
Yeah.
when we, and again, if people don't know what 12 Monkeys is, we're going to lose them at this moment, but they can just go, hey, I better look this up. Is it's an older movie at this point. I think it was 90s or 2000s, and again, it was Bruce Willis, Brad Pitt, Madeline Stowe, and a
It was
host of,
A-list. It was
oh yeah, and it was
A-list film. Yeah.
make no mistake too, the supporting cast was brilliant. But anyway, what am I getting at is this: if someone were to step in and say, hey Terry, let's say he wasn't Terry Gilliam at that point, they would say, look, I don't know what the hell this is, and da da da, and you got this and you got that, we got to cut this, we're gonna da da da. It's ostensibly, plausibly, someone could have cut it, hashed it all up and turned it into whatever else, and possibly made it, I don't know what you want to call it, kid friendly, stay-at-home mom friendly, whatever.
The term commercial, because I
Right.
think that's a good one. Because I think we're getting to the heart of the dichotomy between what art
Hmm.
and commercial product is all about.
Right.
If it's artistic, it stays true to a vision, even
Right.
if it's not an entrenched vision, and probably especially because it's not entrenched, because it's unique. It's a
Yeah.
singular vision. And if it's commercial, it's proven, it's been market research tested as being impactful. And by
Yeah.
definition, it has to fit into a model for consumption.
And that's something, Michael, that I find is a really big problem with today's society, is that marketing executives and the big millionaires and billionaires, it's a little too much what looks good on paper. And we're seeing the blowback of that from big time franchises where the corporations and their executives have stepped in thinking that they know better, and then it just blows up in their face. Now, if someone were to say, well, Matthew, that's just plain not true, I'd be like, look, facts are facts. You can look at how, I don't want to make any call outs, but, there's a lot of franchises right now. I mean, I could do it right now. We just go on to other subjects, but a lot of franchises are just being wrecked because instead of them coming from that artistic, to bring up like George Lucas and the Spielbergs, instead of it being from the inside and then out, they're looking at it from hey, I think we can just do this because if we put a fresh coat of paint on it and we just throw it out there and we just hit all the boom, 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 hit all the marks, we're going to be good. And a lot of the executives say, hey, it sounds like a good idea. We might as well. It looks good on paper. We've got the franchise, the IP. We'll get the actors. We'll do the CGI. It's going to be great. Fast forward to 3, 6, 7, 8, 12, whatever months later, and they're like, what the bloody hell happened? And you're like, I'll tell you what the bloody hell happened. You didn't hire an exemplary writer. You fought back on all the creative decisions that like pushed the envelope and possibly made it more interesting and something really risky because it was too risky. That's why they cut it. And you're like, oh my God. And you did this and then they'll look at you and kind of go, look, who do you think you are, man? I mean, I've got all the money and we're got the, and you're like, hey, look, it's your company. You do what you want. But it's kind of like when people look at George Lucas and think the reason that Star Wars was successful is because he was a millionaire. Well, that wasn't true. The reason Star Wars was successful is because he was an artist and a dedicated one at that. And he fought through the entire process, almost putting his, part of my French, almost putting his goddamn ass in the hospital. In fact, he was in the hospital
Yeah,
because of,
I remember reading that while he was writing the
yeah.
script, he was so stressed out that he kept snipping at his hair compulsively. And he
Mm-hmm.
had a trash basket full of his hair before he finally realized that he could take a Kurosawa movie and adapt it. So he went through a lot of trauma just to write the script. And it wasn't
Yeah.
quite clear in his own head what the hell he was doing because it was raw intuition and he was rolling with his gut. And as it proved by the prequels, he's not a very good screenwriter, especially when left to his own devices. Right? He had a lot of help with the first movie, and then when he was declared a transcendent genius, as well. He should have been. You're going to go up to George Lucas and tell him that Phantom Menace sucks when he's paying your salary and when he's just made $5 billion at the box office, zero pushback, right?
I,
So
I will.
this does cut both ways too, where you've got the artist who's declared a genius, and then the genius can do no wrong, and then you wind up with a self-created train wreck, which is pretty much the Star Wars prequels. So
I,
it's
I
tricky. It's
disagree.
tricky.
I disagree with what you're saying, and that's okay because I mean everybody has their perspectives. But I think what people fail to often remember, because maybe they look with the wrong lens, the year 2025 is, going back to like 1999. George pushed the envelope just like he had in 76 and 77 with the prequels. They changed forever the way both video and sound and CGI and all these things were going to be seen. And I think even the way that he was attempting to do the storytelling was, I'll just kind of bring this up. This is going to be really obscure, but there was some person, the website may still be around, called Star Wars Ring Theory. And it had nothing to do with the movie The Ring, but it's really an old storytelling technique that was kind of like, I don't want to say lost, but it's kind of archaic and old. And they had made a theory that maybe George was trying to do that with the prequels. And I won't go into all the details about that because we'd be here forever, but I read the entire thing. The website had just pages and pages of this person's analysis over the prequels, and it included all these visual aids comparing shots from this film and that, blah 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 blah. So it was pretty complex, but I was like, yeah, this is pretty on point, I feel. And even George alluded to not calling it ring theory back in the day, but when they often interviewed him about the prequels, he mentioned how he was like, I was trying to do my version of what I wanted to see for storytelling and bring back some things that hadn't been done, not only in filmmaking, but had kind of been lost in books like literature. Because what he was talking about essentially did allude to this ring theory. I don't think he ever directly came out and said ring theory, but that's precisely what this person who
Well, see,
made this
that's what I love about the creative process because I
good.
have a name for what George, the theory that he applied, the methodology,
Hmm.
and it's two words, and it's called bad writing.
Nice.
And my vantage point is you don't need all that backstory. You need a hero, and the hero has an obstacle
Mm-hmm.
and a goal, and then you set the hero loose. No one gave a shit about the Trade Federation, and the endless dialogue that went in circles was basically George being unable to articulate a clear dramatic arc. So that's my point of view, and it kind of segues into another interesting thing that we can talk about, which is the role of world building and the
Mm-hmm.
significance of storytelling in science fiction and fantasy. So I did a podcast a little while ago, the 10 things we love about science fiction. And I want to follow that up with a negative version, which is the 10 things we hate about science fiction and fantasy. And it's very, very subjective.
Well, for sure.
So again, don't take this as a slam against your opinion or other people's opinion.
Well,
I love how it's so subjective. Everyone's got different points of view.
for sure.
But specifically, the role of world building, I think, is also very subjective.
Oh, for sure.
And one challenge that I've heard that science fiction and fantasy writers have is that the zeal and a raw enthusiasm behind world building sometimes gets in the way of the characters, their journey, clearly defined challenges and goals, and the raw emotional dramatic energy of the story that tries to be told. So how do you feel about that? Because your series is very world buildy in the sense of you go through elaborate descriptions of the worlds where the dragons dwell. There's a lot of backstory in terms of the mysticism, their beliefs, their connection to their own spirituality. And clearly there's a strong emphasis there. So in a sense, can you come to the defense? Because I'm the naysayer when it comes to heavy world building. And I
Right.
would love your point of view. I want you to punch me in the face with my own opinions to give me that counterpoint, because I've
Well,
talked to so many science fiction and fantasy fans, and they seem to be on two sides with this. You've got people who can't get enough of the deep descriptive world building, the
sure.
endless names and languages, the
Right.
intricacy of the culture of this world, the layers of immersion. And there
Yeah.
are other folks who are like, kind of like me, which is just get to the story. What happened to the story?
Right. Well, I could speak on that. And what I would start with is say there's obviously hundreds of thousands of opinions, and they can float around. And they can be from all different levels of people's, um, I want to say, education, experience, their personality, whatever. So even putting aside all of that and me just speaking as my own self and whatnot, I look at it like, so with my background as is an actor, and that was kind of where I started when I was very young. That's what I was sort of getting into. I didn't obviously start off as a director. I really didn't do that much writing when I was very young, as a middle schooler and teenager, whatever. And so, but approaching every role, I was taught to pretty quickly, pretty early on, to build a backstory to your character that wasn't present on the pages or whatever.
Right.
And so, it would be one thing if someone said, "Well, that's unheard of, and that was probably some weird acting teacher." And da, da, da. It's like, well, you hear that from these professional actors all the time, so that would be invalid if someone were to say, "Matthew, that's kind of a fringe thing that you're
No,
talking
that's
about."
a whole school of pedagogy for acting, which is, you like Doug, Hoffman.
Right.
Hoffman is the Dustin Hoffman is kind of the archetype of that, where you live the role. He did not sleep for like 96 hours before the scene in Marathon Man when he's being tortured in the dentist chair, so he would look exhausted. He was
Yeah,
exhausted.
and it
So
worked, right?
he
Right.
is
There's
the method actor.
method acting.
He's like, I'm not going to just wake up in the morning, have a burrito, and get into character. He was like, I'm living this role. And there,
Right. But
Christian Bale is like that. There's a whole host of actors who believe in exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, but to get back to like with this world building thing is what am I trying to get at with that just to start this point here is that so there's often things that we tie into filmmaking that come through via actors because there's visual cues, there's oral cues, and I don't mean oral like your mouth, I mean AURAL, like your ears, and all sorts of things that come through on the screen. We also have music. Music is. There's a line in my book. Bardiche, who is one of the the main minstrel of the bunch, is he's like music is magic. And so even George Lucas mentioned that music. John Williams' beautiful score to Star Wars was
Oh,
half. It was well beyond it being epic. It's like half of the magic, and in addition to that, maybe another half of the magic would be Ben Burtt's wonderful sound design. So what am I getting at with all that? It's like so world building comes through so many different facets of the gem, if you will, in not screenwriting, but in how a screenplay jumps off of the pages and hits the screen. And then again, like I just kind of mentioned with the actors are doing a lot of the breaking down the walls with the way that they portray the characters. I mean, look at like how now we often refer to characters as the actors who played them
oh,
instead of going, well, Superman could be anybody because you just place the correct
no,
actor in
it's
the role and
Christopher
put them and put
Reeves.
them and put
That's
where
Superman.
whereas where people say, dude, Indiana Jones is fucking Harrison Ford, and that's it, the end, and that's it. And Han Solo is Harrison, blah blah. And I'm not saying that's necessarily bad or wrong or right or I don't care. That's none of my business. What I'm trying to say is though, look at how that affects the world building and the storytelling and the character descriptions and the character personas. Now, I said all that, and that might sound like a mouthful, but now let's put that aside for a second and go, oh shit, what about books? And you're like, yeah, in books, you don't have any music. You don't have any sound. You don't have any actors. You don't have any visuals. I mean, short of if you're like, I'm going to put illustrations. Well, not every book has those, or not every author is going to go down that road, or even has the not capabilities, but the opportunities to put those in there. So why am I answering this question in this laborious form? Now is when the author has to say, look, I got this fucking castle, and we got this thing, and there's the meeting room, and we're going, I better explain these damn things at least once or twice so that my readers have an idea of where the hell the characters are and the gravitas of their environment or whatever the hell it is, whether you're describing an artifact that's super magical and la 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 la, or you're describing a fucking room, could be a bedroom, I don't know, a throne room, whatever, could be anything. Or even the fact that maybe the trees are much larger than the trees on planet Earth. So in this case, Michael, I would say that the world building is not only important, but it's almost required and necessary. That said, people can go too far. They can end up diving so deep into describing a freaking table, where you're like, well, but is this table going to be important later? And if later the author's like, well, not really, I was just trying to, I'm like, well, then what are you doing describing it? I, however, am always on that sort of like, if it's important, you should describe it. If it's important and you have that ability to throw an illustration in there, get it in there, right? Get it in there. Make people see it. Make people feel it. Make people smell it. Let them taste the music of your book. Let them feel the sound. Like, what is it? I'll just kind of jump to my own books. What does it sound like when Jack Ralvian, who's basically my main character, and this does not happen in DD1, it happens in the second book. What happened? What's the sound when he throws the Sunidra core? And people are like, what the hell is a Sunidra core? I'm like, I guess you're going to have to read the books and find out. But it's a weapon. What happens when he throws the Sunidra core? People say, what do you mean what happens? He throws it? And I'm like, no, what kind of, does it's like, like, what is that? What would that be like? Maybe you could chance a little hints of describing it. Maybe we have a visual of the Sunidra core and what it looks like. Maybe there's a whole section that describes when he prepares himself to throw thing, and it's the first time he's ever thrown it because he builds this weapon from scratch, blah 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 blah. So that's important because you go like, holy shit, he built his own weapon, he's doing this thing, this is going to change a lot of things about who he is as a character, but also how the other characters deal with him, and how his foes will be like, oh, okay, we don't want to with him anymore. Like you're about to get your head cut off, and again, this is out of context for people who are listening or watching right now, but it's like there are times, Michael, when I feel that it's really important to describe something in detail. There's other times where it's just excessive and there is no plot point to it. There's no character arc going on with these things, or you're describing some kind of artifact that you're just never going to see again. And that to me is ridiculous. Like, why are you going to do that? It'd be like if I said, okay, let's describe Michael's shoes in this scene. And people might say, well, why the hell we do that? It's like, well, because they're cool. And it's like, well, are they magical shoes? Is it like someone's going to steal them later and this is going to become and I'm like, no, I think he's got cool shoes. I'd be like, that is not a good idea. It's not necessary, whatever. Now, if someone said, no, we want to describe how just gaudy and terrible this character's clothes and outfit is, and it does lend to the ridiculousness of it, and it's gonna matter later for his character arc. You're like, oh, that's a good time to say, Bob wore the most god-awful shoes that were diamonds, all over the shoelaces, and in a smiley face going, seize the day. Like, what the? Okay, now we're talking. But yeah, Michael, I kind of have I could be two sides on this. If someone's like, here, Matthew, read this, and it's just an expositional dump of, you know, all this information, and then only later for you to find none of it matters. I'd be very upset. However, I'm usually on the side of, if I'm reading it, with any luck, the author will pay it off. I call them setups and payoffs, just like a joke, right? When you do a joke, what are the parts of the joke? You got the setup, and then you have the actual, like, you're hinting to the audience to make them kind of feel like, oh, I think this is where it's going. And then you hit them with the payoff, and they're like, oh, that's so funny. I love it. I should have seen that coming. Setup and payoff. So if someone is wearing a necklace and you call attention to it and the characters talk about it, it better be important later on. It better not just be like, oh, I like your necklace, Michael, and then you never hear about it ever again. And I'd be like, why? Then why did you even have a conversation about it? You wasted my time, you wasted the character's time, you wasted your time.
Well, it was a pretty necklace.
Yeah,
So
you see what I mean.
there you
So
have it.
that
Yeah.
could be, it's the, I don't want to go back to all these phrases, but we could call it the pretty necklace, the Chekhov's gun. If I know a lot of people out there have probably heard of the Chekhov's gun thing, but
Yeah,
it's
and I
really
was
not.
even going to mention that. So
Sure.
you led the podcast host, which is a perfect analogy for that, right?
Well,
Yeah.
it's the obvious one, and the irony is that in a way it doesn't have anything to do with Chekhov, and it doesn't have anything to do with the gun. The point is that if you have something that you call attention to, it should have a purpose. Now, in reality, in real life, that doesn't always happen. We all know real life. They've often said this too with stuff. Fiction, in everything in fiction, must somehow make some sense within the storytelling. In reality, there's a lot of shit out there that doesn't make any damn sense, and
Well,
that's just the way.
in good fiction, random elements come in,
Right.
right? So it's the
Right.
opposite of the Chekhov gun, where you have a scene and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, something pops out, and it could be refreshing, surprising, and also incredibly organic. When Butch the boxer in Pulp Fiction runs right into Marcellus Wallace out for coffee and donuts,
Well,
he's scouring the earth for this boxer who ripped him
Well,
off.
there's a
And
whole. It's funny you mentioned the Marcellus Wallace thing going out for people don't know Pulp Fiction. Bruce Willis is driving the car, or at least Butch is driving the car, and then they cross paths. Now the irony is he's going out for donuts, and he was probably working with none other than John Travolta's character to scope out Butch's apartment. Now you'd say, now why would Marcellus Wallace, the kind of gang leader, be out there? It's like because Vincent, or not Vincent, it's a
Sam
Jules
Jackson,
Winfield
yeah,
quit at
right,
the way the story works. So there's
right.
actually good reasons for all of these things. And believe me, with Tarantino, I mean, whether people like Tarantino as a person or not, as a storyteller and a screenwriter and just, character arcs in general, he really is very exemplary at everything. There's a
Oh
reason
yeah, I
everything.
think of all, everyone's got their top 10 movie list. And
Mhm.
even though I'm a big sci-fi and fantasy fan, I've got
Mhm.
Pulp Fiction as my number one, and it's held the
Really?
spot for almost 2 decades.
For me, it's Dances with Wolves.
All right. Well,
Are
good.
you are
That
you
that
familiar
kind of
with the film?
illustrates it too. When we're talking about what to show and what not, and talking about playwrights like
Mhm.
Harold Pinter, the English playwright, you
Oh,
have two people on stage, and you have absolutely no idea who they are, where they're coming from, and even their motivation. And everything erupts organically out of what they do and what they say, and nothing else. And it's up to you to pay attention and figure it out. Then you've got Tennessee Williams. Tennessee Williams has endless exposition. They're up there screaming at each other, and when they're done screaming at each other, they're going to tell you how they grew up in Alabama and what their mother told them, right?
oh,
So what we're getting at here is kind of like, Mookie Spitz podcaster is more Harold Pinter. I like it lean and mean, a lean, mean, dramatic fighting machine.
yeah.
And Matthew Carauddo, you're more Tennessee Williams. You want to add spice to the mix. You
I'm
want to
just
get
myself,
into the
Michael. I'm just
elaborate
myself.
detail of the world.
I will tell you this. I will tell you this. If you read it in my books, it is important. And it might not pay off until later. I've often told this to people too, is that there are setups in book one that don't pay off until book six, which I haven't even completed yet. And this is by design. This is none of it by
Right,
accident.
right. So you're
None of
you're
it by accident.
illustrating vividly that there's two different approaches to writing great science fiction and fantasy, which is
Mhm.
elaborate detail and world building with a delayed payoff.
Mhm.
And then you've got the other point of view, which is just you hit people with your prose like a 2x4 between the eyes constantly. And I
Sometimes
think
it
that that's
depends.
that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, it really depends on the scene, the chapters, the book, all this kind of stuff. There's a lot of scenes where I get very psychological by design. And this is to illustrate also a point, which is like, for example, when you think of why is it that Tolkien's work and even George Lucas's with Star Wars hit so hard with their hero characters and even the Matrix. And for me, I will say this, and I've talked about this before in other interviews and also just with other individuals, just in general, whether it's on uh, writing groups or wherever, is this physical challenges for Michael and Matthew and whoever else are one thing. And then you have sort of the mental, psychological, and spiritual challenges. And those are far more memorable. And I'll explain it kind of like this real quickly. Why do we remember so much the Frodo character? It's not really because of the physical challenges he goes through, which there are obviously many. And the same thing for Luke. He goes through many physical challenges. He gets his freaking hand cut off and all this kind of stuff. And the same thing with Neo from the Matrix. It's not the physical things because those are there and they're painful. Even with the die-hard character that Bruce Willis was so wonderful at portraying of the John Wayne character, and even to bring up a very obscure one, but I hope a lot of people out there know with Roddy Piper, Rip. They Live with John Carpenter's wonderful film is the physical challenges are there, but then you have the psychological ones, and those are the ones that stick harder. So why am I saying all this? In Diamond Dragons, there's plenty of places where I need to dip really hard into the psychological things that poison Jack Ralvian's mind or the other characters. There's a lot of that. And I will at least hint to this is, oh my God, in book five, okay, yeah, there is some psychological warfare going on there because of what without giving anything away, I'll just say they meet psychological foes. We'll just call it that without ruining anything for people who are eventually going to read the series, whether they will or not. But my point is this, is that, right, Michael, is it's one thing when you show a hero who's just getting their ass kicked. And I mean, and shot this. Then they get up and continue this. They go and they figure out how to rest and they come back. This isn't bad. It's, you go, God, man, this guy's a tough hero. But when they also have those psychological things, it kind of impacts you harder. And I mean, people could argue otherwise with me. I don't mind that. But from my beliefs is that if you want your heroes, whether it's your main character or not, by the way, to last and stand the test of time, you really should give them some serious psychological
Oh
uh,
yeah, I totally
roadblocks.
agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
like to quote another writer, Ernest Hemingway said, "Never
Mhm.
confuse movement with action." So it's not just the physical interaction, the kinesthesis of people punching, getting beaten up, running, chasing, but it's the internal state that they're going through. And great actors understand this too. Harvey Keitel is a master of this. If you've
Oh
seen
yeah, I love Keitel's work.
Bad Lieutenant, that is a
Did you ever see, just
classic.
real quick? Did you ever see him in The Duelist with Keith Carradine? It was Ridley Scott's. You got to see it. It's really just this is good for the viewers or listeners and yourself. It's just called the. I want to say if it's The Duelists. Yeah, I think it's plural because it's two of them. Keith Carradine and Harvey Keitel. This was Ridley Scott's breakout major film. If it wasn't like, well, to kind of quickly go, Ridley Scott was mostly doing commercials and brilliant stuff. Like he knew what the hell he was doing. He'd done hundreds of them by that point. Anyway, that was his breakout like feature film, The Duelist, and I want to say it was 1976 or I don't know something. And anyways, this was very old school colonial kind of duelist stuff, and the opening scene is just harrowing. And as a former saber fencer and fencing instructor and all this stuff, I was just like, look, they captured the spirit of it very well. Yes, it's staged combat in a lot of cases. It's all movie moves, but wow, they did a great job. Now with Harvey Keitel, the irony is I remember seeing an interview with him. This is, many years ago, but it was years after the film. And he's like, people kept asking me if I had fencing experience. I had never picked up a blade. I didn't do any stage combat, but I dug in hard and I learned as much as I could and da da da. He really sold it, Michael. Like he makes you believe that he's a master of the weapon. And so I agree with you 100%. Like Keitel
Yeah, and he
was,
does it. He does it subtly. So so in the Bad Lieutenant example, he loses everything. He
oh,
bets everything on one ball game. He's completely destroyed his career, and he's the corrupt, tainted lieutenant in the NYPD, and he knows his whole life is over. And when the results of the game are playing, they're in the background, and it's just a shot on his face, and you could feel what he feels, and
right?
there's literally nothing going on.
Well, you say
But
literally nothing, but maybe you mean
right,
figuratively because that's
obviously,
the
but enough to convey that there's a deep inner anguish, an existential anguish. And he's not flipping out, he's not slamming beers on the bar
yeah.
top,
I'll
he's
share
not,
something that I read, and I don't remember who said it, but I was reading. This is way back in college. I was reading uh, articles and things from like high profile directors or whatever, and I don't remember who said it. And that's the thing because this is 20, 30 years ago. Um, he said the camera can pick up if you smell something.
a
And I was
great
like,
great line.
yo. And of course, he was alluding to not just anyone, like, because you could shoot someone, and I don't want to say a random layman human, but right, a non actor, and you wouldn't be able to detect it. But what he's basically saying is, yeah, as an actor, you need to be able to convey that. And you're not going to go, I smell something. You don't do that, but there needs to be that realization where the audience feels it through the camera. And he's like, yo, the camera can
It's
pick
finding
that.
that balance. You remember when we were kids? I don't know if you did that. You're literally in the sandbox with all your toys and stuff, and you would narrate what's going on. I'm the police car now coming into here and messing stuff up, right? I'm the knight in shining armor, and you'd narrate the action as it was happening. It was show and tell, right? Tell and show, and it's always that balance between telling and showing. And it's challenging, to your point, because there's internal and external states. You could actually show an internal state, right,
Yeah, and just to
with the
make that
narrative.
clear to not only the viewers and the listeners, but even to us too, is right. Remember, it's so easy for people to just look at films and say, "Well, aha, show, don't tell." I'm like, yeah, but you can do that with visual arts, and again, oral, again, AURAL, but you can't do that solely with books. Therefore, in some cases with books, you do have to tell things, literally exposition. But then there's parts where you literally are describing actions that the characters are performing, whether it's literally stomping over to a table, clutching something into their hands or whatever, and thrusting it into the gut of another one and say, "Here, you do it. You're so smart." And then they turn 180 degrees full about and storm right out. Now suddenly you're getting some information about his character. They're angry, they're impatient. You don't have to say Matthew was angry and therefore he picked up the thing and got angry. And you're like, what the hell kind of writing is that? You can show
Yeah,
it with
yeah,
their
or
action.
the adverb and adjective bomb, right? He angrily spun around. Well, obviously the guy is pissed off.
It's not about adverbs to me or verbs. It's about, well, again, this kind of also leads to screenplays too. Is when you're writing screenplays, you want to describe things that the camera can witness, the camera can pick up, the camera can see, because that's the viewer's audience, that's their eye. So again, if we want to show that I'm angry, we have to have that I, grab the book and hurl it across the room, and
Right, it's all action. It's all
that's right.
action.
I don't have to say Matthew is angry. Matthew was angry. Matthew angrily. You can say angrily. There's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes it can be like blah 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 blah. Oh yeah, you think so? Bye. And then they exit. And then it's like, Matthew sat in silence for 6 seconds. He then picked up the book and hurled it across the room. It tells you enough already that you don't have to go into the frustration and all those things, but you can describe the feelings and the moments, and people will then embody their own emotions into it. They'll know what that felt like one time, to be so frustrated that they sat for a while and then they couldn't hold it anymore and went you know or something where you go, aha, I can describe it in this way where we don't have to say he was upset or he was happy. It's like
Yeah,
those are,
let alone provide like 2 pages of backstory as to why he feels
well,
that way in the
yeah, I
moment.
mean, it depends. Like, but my point is this: is that the camera can't see he was happy, but they can see if you storm over to a table, pick
Right,
up a book.
which is it's a good litmus test for writing in general, which is let the action kind of play it out. And also illustrates the difficulty, now that you bring it up, between transposing a novel
Oh,
into a film. And a lot of films go wrong because they rely on the mechanisms of good prose to make a movie. The critical flaw in a lot of films is the voiceover. How many times have you seen a scene begin with rain falling and it's dark and there's lightning? And then the voiceover cuts in on top of that. It was a dark and stormy night. I mean, come on. It's right there, buddy.
I think yeah. I mean, VO is VO. Like when you have voice over the imagery on screen, sometimes it belongs. Like remember, Scorsese was really into that, and he did it very well. And I would say that
Goodfellas works. There's a handful of
for sure.
movies, now that we're talking movies, not even within science fiction and fantasy, but there's a handful of movies where voiceover actually works. Goodfellas is one, Apocalypse Now is another.
Dances with Wolves was
Blade
another
Runner is
brilliant
on the
one.
fence. That could have maybe done without it, like they
Mhm.
did the director's cut. But
Yeah.
most films fail when they do a VO, and it's usually unnecessary.
Yeah, I think this comes back to things like when people talk about the Deutsch angle, and often they'll say the Dutch angle. Well, it's really German, but it was taken from German propaganda um, films. But the angled shot can be overused. But you can overuse anything. You can overuse when you have exposition. You can overuse putting too much action in a row and too little dialogue or whatever. You can overuse CGI. You can hit too hard with music when you're like, this scene doesn't need music, and someone's like, but I want it because it's emotional. When you're like, the scene doesn't
Or
need.
Hans Zimmer, like somebody literally farts in a Christopher Nolan movie, and the entire theater is shaking with the crescendo and decrescendo, right? It's like it's just everything is over the top, which is like and then it takes it to a 10. All right. Hans Zimmer will take the movie to a 10 in 5 minutes. So where the hell do you go from there? That's why it drives me nuts with it. Someone turns. It's like the hamster in the meme, and you turn suddenly, and it's like if every 5 seconds the orchestra is hemorrhaging, then how can you build up and release tension? It's like drives me
Yeah.
nuts.
Yeah, that's an important thing too. I think that's also like it's directors, writing, pacing, when they bring in the composer, the music, the sound. There's all these components that go into it, and ultimately that is up to the director. I'm not sure how like it really depends when we're talking about composers on how much or how little they have control or a working relationship with the director in order to provide whatever it was. Like for example, I've seen some old footage with John Williams and Spielberg just going through the motions of, I don't remember what film it was. It could have been Hook. It could have been Indiana Jones. I don't know. But the point was, it's really cool to see when you see them working through the footage together and they're like, oh, what about this? And we could have this. And it's like these things we talked about earlier, Michael, is it's working with people is a dance, and you have to figure out ways to do that in a way that will not only shape whatever it is that you're working on, which in this case maybe we're talking about a film or a book, but that you are the goal is one and the same, is that you're like, we're trying to move the audience with emotions and these character archetypes and these challenges that they go through and that they overcome eventually, and they lose here and they suck here, they eat the pavement on this one, and you're like, oh my god, when are they ever going to get a break, whatever. And the music can contribute to it. It can take away sometimes if people aren't careful, and the sound, like bad sound can ruin a movie, as well as
Yeah, you
bad
kind of want
costuming
the
or any other
soundtrack to be
aspect.
ubiquitous yet invisible for a soundtrack, right? You want it always around to give the mood, but it's got to be like not prominent, because then it's like it's not what's being shared, it's the soundtrack.
I think it
You want it
depends.
to
Yeah, I think it
accentuate.
depends. Like in Star Wars, I would say that, from the very beginning theme that we hear in the opening of 1977 or whatever, I think George Lucas is trying to make it clear, like, music is going to be moving you to a point. This is a
Yeah,
style
well,
of
he
book.
saw 2001: A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick, and he wanted to add laser fights and cowboys and
Well, I
Indians
think it
to
was
it, and
more
he
than that too.
succeeded.
It goes all the way back to, I think he must have told John Williams, and forgive me because I'll forget the name of the composer, but there was a composer who made something called The Planets. It was just called The Planets, and goes all the way back to like the 1920s or 30s, and forgive me, I do not remember the composer's name, but The Planets was literally like, this guy had made music for, like, Jupiter and Saturn and Earth and da 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 da, and so all of these themes, if you look very closely, you can see that John Williams' music for Star Wars, I don't want to say it emulates it, but it's inspired by it, just like he was inspired by uh, Wagner and all sorts of old school Bach and all sorts of artists of the past. I mean, John Williams was a scholar, musician,
And
and
Tchaikovsky, all
composer.
of them. And then it
Exactly.
goes back again to Kubrick's use of just, the Blue Danube for the graceful spaceship, so that kind of derivation is terrific. The one segue that this is suggesting is you have a lot of interest in a lot of different subjects, right? Obviously, film, not just science fiction and fantasy. Yeah, yeah. So my next question is, how did you get into the Diamond Dragon? So you're a fantasy writer, right? And given all of your interests, I could see you hypothetic. Like, I believe in the multiverse, right? And there's a Matthew out there who, instead of Diamond Dragons, did a mixed martial arts AI robotics series. And there's another Matthew who did, everything we've been talking about. Is there's so much depth and breadth to it. How did you land in doing Diamond Dragons? How did you land in the fantasy genre
Um,
after, all of these experiences in your life?
I think that would be hard to summarize in short, but I would just say this is that, so um, before even penning anything down for ideas or uh, a cast of characters, I'd kind of always wanted to write a story. Not always like since I was one, but I'd thought it would be really cool to have a story that was entirely around dragons for the most part. Like, in other words, that the main characters, villains and heroes alike, were dragons. And, arguably someone would say, well, have we ever seen this before? I'd be like, possibly, but it's whatever it is, it's not common. I certainly haven't found an entire story's worth of that stuff when I was thinking about it 20 years ago or whatever, and not really even since. Now, granted, there are some things I have read to my daughter. There was that Wings of Fire series, which is great, and that's probably corporately backed and wonderful stuff. And those are great. It's a kids series, Wings of Fire, cool dragons, all this stuff. But what I was trying to do is like, I want to do a hero's journey, very Joseph Campbell esque, very Hero of a Thousand Faces esque. It harkens to The Matrix and Star Wars and Harry Potter and Alita Battle Angel and Lord of the Rings, you name it, the hero's journeys. And its skeletal structure is very much based on those things. Now, that said, it isn't some cookie cutter uh, model where I just plug in everything and go forward. But for certain, there is the wise wizard-like character, the mentor, if you will. There's sort of the hot shot who thinks he knows everything, and you get to find out, well, does he, or does he get burned, or whatever. There's sort of like a paladin-like character in there who's very holy and very spiritual of his beliefs and the way that he embarks upon things and tries to keep positivity with everything. It's like, we will prevail because the heavens bless us. It's like, right, a paladin like, and all sorts of things. Like I had mentioned earlier, there's this character Bardish, or Bardish, which is literally a medieval weapon, but he's a bard. It's a purposeful play on words, but he's a great character. And so I just said, I want to make these wonderful characters where all on their own, they're just a wealth of interesting, unique things on their own. And of course, have it where it revolves in this storytelling way around the main hero and that's our villain and this is our this. Da, 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 da. And so that's pretty much where I came from it, Michael. Now, I will also add, and people can find out about this in my other previous interviews, is that like I loved video games ever since I was young, and just to name a few brands out there that have come and gone or whatever, there was the Ultima series of games made by Origin Systems, Ultima 1 through, I mean, the main ones I loved were 4 and 5, beautiful ones, Quest of the Avatar, all this great stuff. And then there was the Might and Magic series of games, which eventually transitioned into the Heroes of Might and Magic series. And that was by John Van Caneghem and New World Computing, which is now long defunct and it's been bought over by Ubisoft and all this other stuff. But so what am I getting at? You had like the Elder Scrolls, and that's way before Skyrim, exploded onto the scene. There was the Daggerfall was a second in the series, and then Morrowind and Oblivion and so forth. So like, what about all that? And it's like, well, yeah, I was inspired by all of those things often. Another game that I would like to do a shout out to because it's brilliant, and I hope they make a film of it someday. Deus Ex, which was made by Warren Spector and Ion Storm, which goes all the way back to like 1999, 2000. It was just as the Matrix was hitting, and it's a brilliant story, like fantastic storytelling. So really, Michael, ultimately, it just came down to, look, my background is in storytelling, and it kind of transcends the idea of saying, well, are you just fantasy? Are you just sci-fi? Are you do romance? Do you do mystery? What about horror? I mean, I knew about Peter Jackson before Lord of the Rings. I was like, oh my God, the director of Dead Alive, aka
I was
Brain
just going
Dead.
to say the ultimate zombie movie. Most
I
people
was like,
don't know this. That
yes,
is the best zombie movie ever.
it has the best line ever. I mean, I died when I was watching with my friend, and we burst out laughing when people don't know this. It's called Brain Dead / Dead Alive. It depends on the country that you're in. But anyways, a purple pajama wearing priest pops out of the woodwork. They're in a graveyard. All these zombies are attacking this guy. This dude pops out and he's like, "Stand aside, boys. This calls for divine intervention." And then he just jumps in, does all this karate and crazy martial arts. And then literally after kicking some zombies and stuff, he's like, "I kick ass for the Lord." And you're like,
Right.
I, I kick ass for the Lord. It's the best I've ever seen. It's so funny. And it was basically where horror comedy, I don't want to say that was like, it was the first of its kind, but it's like things like Evil Dead, which later Sam Raimi, Bruce Campbell, all these wonderful things. They kind of got their legs from all that wonderful stuff but
Oh,
he was.
just unmitigated gore. The guy takes a lawnmower and just
And
goes
yeah,
right
and
through
comedy
a room
mixed.
full of zombies.
It was brilliant.
And probably because of its humorous undertone, it's more palatable than if it would just be shooting straight from the hip. If that movie would have just shot straight from the hip and taken itself too seriously, it would
No,
have been
it wouldn't
just
work.
horrible. But the fact that it was laughing at itself the whole time made it such a unique pleasure to be, to see something revolting and hysterical at the same time.
That's why we have stuff like Evil Dead and stuff, right? With him talking about he's like,
He was definitely a trailblazer, and who would have known that this guy goes on to do the Lord of the Ring franchise for $4 billion.
I knew it was going to be great, and here's why. I was like, yo, you can tell that Peter knows how to shoot horror, and for what people did or did not know, because maybe they didn't read Lord of the Rings and they weren't familiar, whatever was. I was like, Lord of the Rings is begging to have those elements of where it's very serious and those shots need to take place. And one of the best ones that I remember going, yo, it's mirrored even in Dead Alive, is where you have I mean, your listeners will not be able to see me, but right when Ian McKellen and we've got the big telephoto lens just pops up, is it secret? Is it safe? And it's like, holy Jesus, jump scare, Batman! What are you doing here? And it's like, well, you can convey so much in just a single shot and a single line if you do those kind of jump scare shots. And Sam Raimi was king of that, and so was Peter Jackson. And that's why I think horror is also a beautiful genre. Even though some people might say, "Well, I don't like horror because it's always about blood and guts and all," it's not always. Sometimes it's literally about that psychological kind of setups of the shots, so that you're getting nervous just watching. But altogether, the shots aren't all that big of a deal. It's just you see that character super close to the camera going, and you feel panic. And it's like, well, welcome to the art of filmmaking. So how
Yeah,
else do
and
you do
again,
horror?
it's the character. The camera is a character is a great
It
way to
can
look
be,
at that
yeah,
too. Yeah,
those
yeah.
unnecessary, well, not unnecessary zooms, but those elaborately dramatic zooms, or turning into the shot where suddenly it's like they turn their head and go, ah, oh, and it's like going somewhere. You're like, ah. But we all know in filmmaking, it's like the actor knew that dude was behind him the whole time, but if the camera doesn't show it, you don't see it until they decide now you get to see it. So yeah, I mean, we could go on a lot of not tangents necessary with this, but yeah, there's an art to all of this, Michael, and I feel that it's good if people study at least a little bit of whatever you want to call it, color palettes. Like I could go on forever about that. Why would you have a movie where it's all sepia tones underneath and whatever? Why would you have a super hyper colorful film where it's just wow, what a myriad of colors? Why would you have something that was weird? We kind of go with these green tones for these scenes, but then these very blue tones for these scenes. Interesting. I wonder why the director did that. And it's like there's a whole dialogue. You go on color palettes. We talk about sound, talk about music, talk about the different voices for a character. Like what happens when you have a character is delivering lines like this versus a character going, "Hey guys, you know what we got to do? This is what we got to hurry up. Let's go there." You're like, Jesus Christ, like this is a difference. You could give them the same lines, and with one person high pitched and talking too fast, and the other one down here and at a lower, slower pace, completely different motif and mood from that thing. So all of these things, the costuming, what you're wearing, this is important to all of the storytelling.
So you're doing the Diamond Dragons, right? So you did awesome backstory of how you got to Diamond Dragons,
Mhm.
and it's populated entirely with dragons, right? You've got
Almost. I don't want to give too much away, but it's like dragons are the primary characters.
okay, all right, all right. And the reason I bring that up is I talked to Greg Sorber, who is an indie author. He was my last guest, and he's got the Mech Haven series. And the reason I bring it up is it's got some analog to yours, because instead of being primarily dragon focused like you are, he's a transformer kind of humanoid mech AI creatures. And he mentioned to me that in his original vision, he wanted to keep it solely the robots, just a robot saga. And he, like you,
Sure.
also has a multi-book series. So he's on book 4 right now, and he's cranking. But then he brought up the point that he found he had to bring in some human components for relatability and contrast. Have you felt that pressure point to bust out or bust with the dragons?
Well,
To
I'll put it this way without ruining too much, because of course I try not to. Well, and it doesn't matter, right? Too, like, I would look at it like, hey, read the book, don't read the books. I will put it to you this way: is that I look at myself as I am the orchestrator of my symphony. And therefore, it's like, if I'm going to involve a character, they have a purpose, they have a place, and they have a reason to be there, raison d'etre, if you will. And so when I introduce characters, people can understand that they're not just throwaway, they do have a purpose and a place for it. And so if people are reading and they're like, da, 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 oh, another dragon, oh, da, 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 and then they suddenly come upon a whatever type of character that is not a dragon, maybe it should give them some pause to be like, whoa, what the hell is this guy doing here, or whatever. And so it's like, I feel like it's not so much a pressure of, oh, you better do this and hit the marks of that. It's like, what is your storytelling leading to, and what characters need to be there in order for you to continue uh, telling the story, showing the story, unfolding the story powerfully. And so there you go. I will say this. In book 5, I introduce the character of Anna, also known as Anateiana, but and she's by far one of my most favorite characters I've ever designed. And I've been thinking about her. It sounds weird, but more like thinking about, like, okay, what are the details of this character since 2021. So it's been a while, and I was like, man, the design of this really, I'm absolutely ecstatic about the illustration that I have come up with in conjunction with my one of my artists. And then I usually do a lot of excess work to whatever they bring to the table. And like, it's one of the best illustrations in the book. It might be one of the best illustrations of the series. And I don't want to say this happened by accident, but it's like, you never know until you're done. And when I was coming close to it, I was like, this is really good. Like, I don't know what happened, but this one's exceptional, you know. So I'm really happy about that character. And I will at least say this, because this isn't that big of a stretch. She's not a dragon. She's not a dragon.
maybe that gives power to my question, which is,
Mm-hmm.
you have this dragon centric universe, and they're
Mm-hmm.
all working stuff out. You have the cool evil dragon who you introduce, and then
Yeah,
I
there's
believe
several.
yeah,
But
I
the
love
main
the
one is
name.
nitrosite. Like, what
I
kind
know,
of
I
name
love the
is that?
name too.
Nitrosite.
And then the first book, I believe, ends with his defeat, if that's right. I don't want to give spoilers.
It doesn't really matter. I mean, here's the thing: if people read the blurb to book 2, they'll realize that nitrosite was defeated. And so there you go. Because the opening of the second book's blurb is something like, nitrosite lost and they won, and some of that is pretty obvious. Well, it's pretty obvious that, yeah, Vader lost. Vader
After
lost at the beginning.
following the Dragon saga, and you've been immersed with it since 2021, right? By introducing this very, very charismatic, unique human character, it pops out, right?
Well, this one, I didn't necessarily tell you whether it was human or not, but I
Okay,
mean,
but this Anna Karenina.
Anna Karina, there you go. Anna Tayana, don't worry, it's a tough name, believe me, and it's by design, but she
she's
just says Anna.
counterpoint. So it's almost like she's been building, and then in her release, you got tremendous satisfaction as a writer too.
It was because even back then, see, and this is something I'm a big proponent of, and nobody has to take me at face value on this or choose to say, okay, that what he's saying here means it's law. It's just how I proceed, and it's what I advocate. Is you should know what you're doing before you do it. And in some cases, you want to stretch it all the way. Like if you're writing a series, I feel like maybe you should know the ending of the series, if possible. It doesn't mean you're necessarily going to know the, oh, I have 8 books. I'm like, yeah, it might be tough. But the point is, like, you should know a lot. You should be seeing way into the future and know why are you doing it. And this character, I wanted them to be there for a long time. But I also knew them, like, just not showing up for many books. There's a good reason for that too. Like, can't show up earlier than this. Like, it would be folly to bring this character in
Yeah,
until
you have really good self control. In my science fiction series, of which the first book is out and the second one will be out, hopefully soon. I have the big bad guy, and she is spoiler alert, a Boltzmann brain. So she evolved organically out in a dying universe, and she's gained immense power. And I just wanted to tease the reader with the presence of this super bad guy.
oh,
I couldn't do it. I was like, I have to bring I not only she wasn't going to make herself present until like the end of the second book and a 5-book series, and it actually opens with her. so so not only could I, hold back from revealing Alice, as she's called, or she calls herself, but I actually open with her birth and
that's
tell
cool.
her a little vignette of her story as kind of a little bit of backstory to the whole trajectory of the thing. And it has enough ambiguity and poetry and mystery, so it doesn't come across as too telly. But I couldn't help myself. And then I have a
That's fair.
bunch of the action occurs on Earth for the first 2 books.
Cool.
Basically, a hustler develops a machine that could jump universes in a multiverse. They don't jump until the end of the second book. And then I couldn't wait for some of the later scenes, so I bring them in as premonitions interspersed through the first book. So I have to give you hats off for your self-control. I couldn't help but pepper the series with events outside.
I mean, without knowing pretty much anything about your work other than what you have just told me, then I can just say this, Michael, is that I'm like, we all have choices that we can make, and it's not necessarily bad. I look at it like this, and it brings me to at least something else that I often try to bring up when I'm on these writers groups or people ask me, "What's your opinion on this?" I will often say, "I'm like, look, it's not a bad idea to write 3, 4, 5, 6 different versions." I often say that too, like 3 to 6 is fine. You don't want to do too many. You don't want to just say, "Oh, I only have one version." It's okay. Write 3, 6 versions of a chapter or of a possible meeting. Like if you're like, I need these 2 characters to meet, and I want this, and I need this, and I need that. Like, right. Oftentimes we have that like a bullet point. We go like, Bob meets Jerry, whatever. Okay, but where? Okay, well, what if they did it in the tavern? That could work. The tavern in that. Well, no, what if it was on the road? Yo, and then suddenly, you have maybe several occasions, or you go like, are they meeting amidst many others or around them in a public place, or are they like, no, they're out in the middle of nowhere. This is them 2 alone, and like one of them could
Yeah,
come.
that you illustrate dialing it up. And if you have options, then tend to dial it up. Like add juice to it, right? And I don't feel bad. I don't feel bad doing what I did. Actually, I love it. I think it
That's good.
exceeded my expectations to set it
That's
up the
important.
way I did. It was just my initial feeling was to push it off, and I said, "No, I'm just going to hit them right away." And I agree 100%, which is like, look at all your options as a creative person, and then pick the one that's most exciting.
Right, the one that's most effective for your
Yeah.
storytelling, your characters, and all that stuff. And let's be honest here, a lot of times it's I don't want to say the lesser of 2 evils because then it makes it sound like they're both bad ideas, but it's more like the better of 2 equally ish, almost. They're like, this will get it across, and it's good, and this one, it's pretty much the same, but it's a different play. Da, da, da. You're just sometimes you have to say, I like that one better. I'm going to go with this. And maybe someday someone will say, how come you didn't do that one second way? That
Well, you
seemed
feel
also,
it here. I think you bring
yeah,
up a good point as a
you're just
creative
curious.
person that
Yeah,
a lot of writers I think are up here, and then they're trying to figure out logically what might be the best. And I think I know I'm on the right path when I feel it in my gut.
exactly.
It's a lot like poker. You know when you're playing poker and you're on a winning streak, it defies statistics and logic and math. It's just gut. It's a gut feeling. And I think as a writer, if you feel it in your bones that it's the right move to make, then you need to trust your own intuition. And it's bad to keep changing your mind. It's not about like this and that and readjusting. I think you need to go right from the heart
Mhm.
and then go for it. Express it with conviction and simplicity and intensity. And most of the time, that'll be the right move to make.
Yeah, no, you bring up a good point, Michael, is that, and look, this can harken, at least for me, to back to being an actor, is that you, at least from my perspective, and again, people may disagree, you may even disagree with what I'm about to say, is that there's this cerebral side which must exist. It must exist, at least again, from my perspective. But then there's also the organic, emotional, and what do I want to call it? The spiritual and kind of visceral existence of whatever the hell component it is. You may say, okay, we need a sound effect here in a movie. And so they go, okay, but then that sound effect has to sort of be born of that it really fills up the moment and it does feel organic. And the same with music and the same with an actor's portrayal or performance. And so there's sort of this dichotomy where it's like you have to be cerebral about how you're going to unfold your scenes, but you don't want to be overly mechanical and sort of robotic and like hitting these artificial beats just because maybe some, part of my French, some fucked up outline tells you this is what you got to do at 20 minutes in, you must have introduced a blah,
Oh
blah, blah,
yeah,
blah,
that's
blah.
the worst.
It's
That's
not good.
formulaic.
It's
And
not
it's a
good.
Hallmark movie. You know Hallmark movies? Are
Of
you familiar
course.
with?
And, it's like there's such a thing as saying, well, formulaic is there for a reason. I'm like, yeah,
They could
but
be
that reason
fun.
is to be a guideline and not a sort of hard and fast rule set where you're just putting a cookie cutter thing in there. Now, granted, some people might say, yo, these people did cookie cutter things for years and now they're millionaires and they did it. I'm like, there is that. But I'm like, look, I'm not talking about those things. Me personally, I'm trying to create something unique and artful and again, this kind of visceral, spiritual kind of thing that grips you by the collar and takes a hold of you, akin to the way the Matrix took a hold of people and Star Wars and even Harry Potter to some extent, or however you want to look at it, and Alita Battle Angel. I know I mentioned all Lord of the Rings, whatever. And I feel that those only come when you are like finding that good balance between saying, look, here's some technical things we must get done in order to make the storytelling work. But then suddenly you're like, okay, what do I feel? Oh, this is what they would say here. And this is what would happen. Oh, what if this? And you just kind of go with the moment and you're flowing. And then you finish that and you sit back and now you can go back and analyze your scene. And by the way, I'll just quickly also say that this is also how I approach the idea of dancing back and forth between putting on different hats. And what the hell do I mean by that is I have my writing hat, my artistic hat that I'm putting on. And I mean that in a proverbial sense. I don't physically put on a damn hat, but I could, I guess, and write the scenes and get the characters arguing or doing whatever the hell it is they're doing. And I kind of just flow. And then I will, maybe days later, maybe just hours later, depends, whatever, coming back. I have a completely different hat on. This is my editor's hat where I'm like, okay, let's go back and look at what happened in that scene. My God, I had them screaming at each other and they're this. I'm like, is it going too long? And what's the nitty gritty? Ooh, that's a good line. I forgot I wrote that line. Good. I'm going to keep that there. Other ones I'll be like, they're covering the same ground. I don't need any of that. I don't need any of that. Let's kill that. Kill that. And then other ones I'll be like, ooh, this is a great section. It's laborious, but oh my God, will it rip people's souls out? I'm keeping that. So there's that kind of process is just the way that I have to approach it. And I dare say that if there are people out there who then have editors and illustrators and cover designers and what other stuff, they're going to have to rely on them for those kinds of input and things. And whereas for me, I gotta do all that myself. So I do have to put on those different hats, and I feel it's really important to know which one you're wearing at the right moment.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm my own editor, for better or for worse, and I'm the toughest editor out there, at least through my own lens. So David Mamet put it well too. David Mamet said that great writers start with a scalpel and end with a chainsaw,
Yeah.
which is you're noodling around, you're playing around, and then you're building the whole edifice, and then you realize there might be an entire wing of the structure that just sucks and it's got to go, and then you got to just hack that thing off,
And the irony,
and
Michael, is that with this, if you put yourself in the correct mindset, you will not be looking at it as a negative thing. You'll be looking at it as a positive thing because you're just going, this simply improves the story and I'm going to do it. And
oh,
sometimes it means the opposite. Sometimes you're going, I need to look at this. This is underdeveloped. Look at the scene. It's a beautiful scene, and I've left it a skeletal, just barely functional mess. I need to develop this scene. It needs 3,000 more words. I'm going to do it. So we
right,
have both of those possibilities on the table. The real question is, are you going to identify those things because that you're willing to do that work and be that person and literally kind of step away and go, I am not the author right now. I'm literally looking at this from storytelling, character arcs, developing the environment under which that these characters are behaving in so that the audience knows, well, where the fuck are they? I'll give a quick example is how many times, Michael, I get upset with this because I try to tell this on these groups out there. People will start a scene in what I call a void environment. In other words, people are talking, things are happening, people are walking all over, and they have not set the scene at all. So they know in their writer's mind where the characters are, how big the room is, if they're outside, if they're inside, if there's a freaking cart of food over to the left. They know all this, but they didn't say it. They didn't put it on the page. So now you as the reader are going, what the hell is going on? Like, I don't know where these people are. You have to be adept enough to sit back and go like, oh, you know what? I started this scene very badly. I didn't explain where they are. Ugh, I better put that in. I need to get that out there so that at least the readers are aware of where my characters are or whatever. So, and again, this comes back to whether it's time to chop, X and Y and Z. You're like, they don't need to know that. It's not important. I can do it later. Oh, look, here's a scene that I wrote. I'll give an example, right? Go like, let's say you wrote a scene and then fast forward, and you wrote a different scene that kind of covers that and these other things. Now you can axe the other one that you wrote 3 months ago. And you're like, that's fine. Like, I'm perfectly happy to do those things because you go like, the goal is accomplish the objectives, get the storytelling done, get the character arcs done and on board or whatever, progress things, but you don't need to belabor them necessarily. You know what I mean? You have to find those places where you go like, I think I can cover this in like kill three birds with one stone, so to speak. Whereas in this other scene, we really only covered one thing, and I can do it later in this scene like that with 3 lines. So I don't need that whole scene. So for
yeah,
me, just put it this way, Michael, is I don't want to say neutral when I cut things, but I just look at it and go like, well, I mean, it doesn't belong anymore. I don't need it. I don't want it. I wouldn't cut great stuff where I'm like, why would I cut something that is excellent and really develops the characters and the story and this? Why would you do that? It makes no sense. So you need to look at it like from that perspective is go like, be able to recognize when you have a material on the board or whatever you want to call it, good, great, whatever material on the board, and also recognize when you're like, A, it's kind of mediocre bad, and B, I want to say I've already covered it in this other scene. Why am I going to do it again?
right. And the opposite is also true, where you're wearing your editorial hat, and then you realize, wait a second, the continuity from from A to B to C is okay, but then from C I go to G. And then you might be missing some links. And there also might be threads for some of the characters in terms of their own development, their own journey.
Yeah.
And then you realize, and this happened to me in this last book too, where a character just kind of vanishes for a
Yeah, it
while.
can if you're not
And
careful.
then I'm like, what happened to Penny? And then I realized that by adding her back in, embellish not only the trajectory of her journey, but the whole book. And then it created new problems, not only for Penny, but for me as the writer. And then that helped the book come together. So for me, the editorial process is almost interchangeable with the creative one, where, to your great point, I'm wearing one hat and the other. And then I realized that when you look at just the naked plot and the journey of each character, there's opportunities to bring out even more of the overarching narrative. And that's thrilling to do. That's really, really exciting.
Yeah. On another note too, and this is just a shout out for any people who are out there writing or whatever, there's other ways too to develop characters that people often don't think about, but when you like delve into writing classes, like really good teachers will teach this, is all too often people will say, okay, well, I need to develop this character, so that means that character needs to do this thing and they need to be there. I'm like, that's not true. Sometimes you can have other characters describing things and the character doesn't even, they're not even there yet. Maybe you haven't even actually introduced them. Maybe some character, Michael's like, blah, 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 blah. And I go, huh? I'm like, did you just you mentioned Jose? You're like, yeah, you know him? I'm like, yeah. I wish I didn't. I'll see you later, Michael. And you're like, what the fuck what was that all about? Suddenly, Jose is in the reader's minds or the viewer's minds. And they're like, what did he do to that character that I didn't do nothing, right? I didn't say nothing really. I didn't actually have Jose there. He's not developed or whatever. But suddenly we have some development. We did it with 2 lines. And it was with other characters. Jose wasn't present. We didn't say anything about it. We didn't say he had a gun and he pointed at me and then we didn't exposition the shit out of it. We just had the character in despair or mystery or something about it. So what am I getting at with that is just don't forget that when you're developing a character, they don't actually need to be present when you develop them. And it sounds counter if you just say that alone, like if we just took this edit and said, just have Matthew say this and we'll post that online, a 6-second clip. You don't necessarily have to have a character around to develop it. People will be like, that don't make no sense.
Well, we could take it out of context, or we could also add to it, which is the best practice that I have picked up is that the characters that resonate the best for you as a writer is you. So I had this revelation when I was writing this last book that the main anti-hero, the protagonist of my whole science fiction saga, is an exaggerated, awful version of me. This guy has all my worst qualities ratcheted up. If I'm like an 8 or 9 in attention deficit, this guy's an 11, 12, 13. If I'm financially irresponsible, especially at this point in my life, this guy's an absolute train wreck. And then what happened was I was writing about myself and I was using this character as a personal and psychological catharsis for everything shitty about me. And by letting it out, I became vested in this guy. And this guy took on a life of his own.
That's
but
good.
he was channeling all of my bad qualities in a way that made it thrilling for me to write about him.
Right.
And he started writing himself. And the other characters in the book were projections and often distortions of many of the worst qualities of people that I've known, that I've loved, that have been a part of my life. So I created this house of mirrors of everything awful in terms of my relationship with myself and my interpersonal relationships. And to me, this created a real cauldron of emotion and neediness and an almost desperate quest for some kind of resolution. And that made this book so thrilling and relatively easy to write, at least in terms of the creative imagination that went into it. It's hard to do it. As you know, it's hard to write a book. But that's my biggest learning, which is you can create a character who's just this projection of yourself in ways that could be very provocative and interesting.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would agree with that to some extent in the sense that if it's appropriate for the material that's being written and the storytelling, you're like for example, I'll bring up something that kind of has to do with one of my characters. There's a character, and this doesn't really spoil anything too. People can find out in one of my the opening video of DD1. There's a sort of video pre-visualization, if you will, of like the first 20 minutes of the story, the screenplay version, really. But the point is, there's sort of a video and there's voiceover and original music. Anyway, Violetta flies on in. And people are like, who the hell's Violetta? It's like Princess Violetta flies on in on her chariot. And she's got these dragons holding the chariot, on these giant, poles, and she's just sitting in her throne, in this. You're like, what the hell? She's not flying on her own. And immediately when she's introduced, you're like, okay. And you can see how a lot of, like, one of my other favorite characters, Llewellyn's like, he just looks up and he's like, oh, joy, here she comes. So you immediately know, you're like, oh, well, he doesn't like her. And she flies in on this pomp and circumstance kind of thing. And she's very regal in this. And you immediately and quickly realize, oh my God, she's a narcissist. She is Scarlett O'Hara to a certain extent. So why would we do this? Well, you're like, these are character archetypes. We meet people like these kinds of people all over the place. And I don't just mean we only meet narcissists. The point is, you meet the archetypal tough guy, or too timid, or whatever, you name it, whatever you want. So you're like, you can fit these, you take those archetypes and enjoy them, and find ways to put them into your story where either A, they're going to arc eventually and learn, or they're going to be challenged, lose, and then just fade away into the distance because they refuse to change. And right, we often see this, Michael, is that's essentially how a lot of villains work, is they refuse to change because they're so steeped in their, I am so great at everything, and they get their ass handed to them by the end of the story or whatever. And that can happen to even not hero characters, but main characters. Main characters never change. I'll give a quick example, because you mentioned gambling earlier. I'm not much of that, but the film Rounders was, what a fantastic film. Matt Damon, uh, beautiful cast, Gretchen Mol, which I still wish I saw her a lot more. But anyway, because she was so talented, as well as being beautiful. But the point is, Edward Norton played this great character, Worm, and Edward Norton, of course, is brilliant in all the roles that he's always approaching. The way that he takes on these characters, just like any Matt Damon himself and all these other kind of people who really dig hard. But Worm just didn't learn, and you kind of knew from the beginning. You're like, oh man, I don't know about this character. He's a narcissistic, arrogant, brazen, I don't give a about anybody but myself character. And you're like, oh God, this is all kinds of badness for any character who's involved with him. But you're like, yeah, by design. So ironically enough, what a lot of people forget is, at one point Worm just disappears and you never see him again. And that's it. He just leaves the film. And that he just obviously just bails. And if you think about it, you're like, yeah, he never learned. So he probably ended up dead in a ditch somewhere or whatever, and trying to string along another, a dirty deal that he's going to do, and probably got his ass handed to him or whatever. But so, like, what am I saying with all this is, like, yeah, you can take take inspirations, I should say, from your own life. If you're like, man, my grandfather was da 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 da, but he just never budged on this one. I can integrate that kind of thing. That whole, like, I'm so dead set on this dying idea that doesn't really, it's not true, but they are just gripped onto it so hard. They ain't never going to let it go. It's not true. It's not scientific. It's not real. But man, you can integrate that. And in my case, with this Violetta character, I was like, yeah, I can make a narcissist archetype and see if I can make the audience really dislike her. But, and again, I'm not really revealing too much with this. I won't even say when. How about that? I won't say when this happens. What do you want to bet that this narcissist gets some lessons just right in her face, and eventually either she's gonna learn and do some changes and see if she can continue to survive, or B, or whatever, one, two, B, A, B, she's gonna lose and fail and eat it hard because, so people can find out. Now, I'm not saying these are the only characters. I only write narcissist characters. That would be stupid. Like I just said earlier, we have a musician character, poet and a minstrel, and he's inspiring with his music. He's like, music is magic. We have this paladin-like character, Dupre. He fancies himself sort of a holy knight. He literally carries a sword and wears armor. And all the other dragons are like, why are you doing this yourself? Why are you doing this yourself, man? Like, what's the armor? And he's like, shut up, man. Like, it gives me extra protection and I can reach longer with my weapon. And they all kind of, they're poking fun at him, but at the same time, they're like, yo, he's cool. It's a good idea. Maybe we should do these things. So there's these dichotomies where you make these very interesting characters. And I feel that sometimes if you did it right, someone could say, wow, could there be spin-offs of all these characters having just their own stories? And I'm like, well, if you did it right, I would say, why not? Like, why would you think otherwise? Right when we look at like even Star Wars, you go like, yeah, they made a Han Solo movie. I mean, if
Yeah,
people say
a
good,
lot
bad,
of them
wrong,
suck. A lot of them suck,
well, I'm not
but
going to go into that side of it. But my point is, the character is obviously interesting enough that you could make a
Mandalorian
whole.
was good. Mandalorian
Yeah,
was
right. You
good.
could make an entire film about Leia. You could make an entire film about Harry Potter, or not Harry Potter, but in the Harry Potter universe about Hermione. You could make an entire film about Trinity before Neo showed. Whatever. So the point being is, if your characters are interesting enough and that they do have some semblance of an arc or an arc that they fail, like that's something that often people don't talk about, right, Michael? Is that makes it interesting. And I feel that it's important that all the characters, at least this is from my perspective. And when I say all, I don't mean like 100%, but 90% of your characters, short of your messengers or your token villains that you're like, these guys are going to die like right away. they're
Feel
stormtroopers. They're
Game of
bad.
Thrones, just kill
Well,
everyone, right?
well, what I mean is like when you have stormtroopers or you have the general
Yeah,
army who runs in.
some of them are clearly expendable, right? But you mentioned archetypes, which is interesting, and then you talk about people that you know in your life, like your grandfather, so and such. So how much how much do you relate characters and your narrative to the life that we live in 2025? So your fantasy, you got dragons, they're living on the dragon world, they got their dragon problems, and they got their dragon goals. So when you're writing, how much of society's issues, culture, politics is infused in your work? Because I was very much conscious of this when I wrote it, and I did hard science fiction realism. So
Right.
I'm dealing with gender problems, men and women, especially among the Zoomer generation. The women are doing so much better than the men. I'm
Okay.
dealing with cross generational issues with everyone's hating on the boomers, right?
Mhm.
And you got the Gen Xers against the Zoomers, and you got the millennials who seem to have been discarded. So I would literally listen to the news and it would be infused into my narrative themes. And then a lot of my characters, in terms of their struggles, most of my characters are Gen Z. So they're much younger than I am. And I had to project myself into their problems and see the world through the lens of this younger generation, because I felt bringing up these societal issues would empower the narrative with all that much more juice. So I'm on Earth. I'm with, like, air quote, real characters dealing with real situations. The crypto bubble I talk about all these cultural issues, politics. It's all infused in there, but you're on the dragon world, right? In a
Right.
dragon kind of way. So how much of these issues are there, or do you consider your writing mostly escapist and
Right.
kind of independent of
Yeah,
our
no, those are really good
messed
concerns,
up
Michael.
world?
No, those are really good concerns and also comparisons. Is like, yeah, that's good, Michael. Like, I think that's cool. Like that, everybody has their way of saying, well, can I make statements with these things that are there's parallels? I will say this is that there are parallels to the idea of just existence and the whole like, I'll kind of quote lines from Sagan's Contact, which Jodie Foster got to deliver. That what are we doing here? Like, what's it all mean, and why are we doing all this stuff, and what's beyond this planet and da da da. However, I will say that because I decided that they are on their own planet and it is essentially just dragons, and you quickly find out too that the planet is akin to the size of something more like Jupiter or Saturn. And I make these comparisons not because that they exist in the universe necessarily, but when I'm just quickly getting some exposition out to get people in the mindset of, well, wait, how big is their planet? I'm like, part of my French, pretty fucking big. I mean, it's considerably larger than Earth in the sense
I
that
I was wondering about the gravity situation on the dragon planet.
I won't go into all those things right this minute, but the point being is that overall we go, it's a departure from all, humans are not a thing, are they? Question mark. And so what am I getting at? It also goes deeper in the sense that you quickly understand that these characters are very, I will kind of say this with not tongue in cheek or whatever, but it's more like just to help get the moods across to your viewers or your listeners is the characters are very Shakespearean in the sense that they feel intelligent. They're very regal overall, even for the more base characters to a point. In other words, what am I getting at? It's like they operate on a level of intelligence that seems like if you were to say, well, what was the author actually really getting at? Even though it's not, he needs to keep it relatable, but that there seem to be considerably more intelligent than humans, even though humans don't exist in this world, you know? Not to mention the fact that you just think about it and go like at any time, and I kind of touch on these things in the first book and then you get off them so that people are like, okay, we're free to enjoy the story, is that you have to remember, Michael, they have wings at any given time. I can fly and land and be like, oh, Michael, it is good to see you again. The soldiers report this, that, and the other. And you're like, very good. Well done. Report to them with blah, 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 this information, da, 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 and I will see to this. Yeah, ha. And then I fly. What the hell? Like humans can't do that. When we say hello and goodbye, we're kind of generally walking away or shake hands and get in a car or whatever. But like you have to remember that A, they're flying to and from, and B, you might never see them again. Maybe because they're amidst war all the time, or it's dangerous to fly. Like, I mean, if you get knocked unconscious while you're flying, I don't care who you are.
Especially with that gravity, buddy.
It's
I don't even know
it's
how they hit the road.
as they say, it's the fall that kills. And I do make that clear also that, I mean, I don't mean to say that the gravity is identical to Earth. I never come out and say, yeah, the gravity was exactly 2.193413. That would be the stupidest thing. But you do get the point that they do have gravity. And yeah, if you were knocked unconscious while flying and then you land on the ground, you're probably dead. So, as tough as you might be as a dragon, you don't want to be knocked unconscious. So you get also the feeling that sometimes they fly low on purpose so that if they were knocked down, they could hit the ground and survive. It's not common for them to be like, I'll just go ahead and fly 1,000, whatever. So, but what am I getting at with all this stuff is that you get this feeling that you're like, yeah, this is a completely different world with completely different thoughts and perspectives. The distances between one location and the next is just ludicrous. You also get the feeling that I don't want to say it's lonely or barren, but you're like, whoa, the way he's describing it, like I expected we would see orcs and goblins and unicorns and blah, 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 and this and blah, blah, blah. You quickly get the feeling that it's kind of a parallel to the way humans are in the sense that humans on Earth are quote unquote, and I do use this with air quotes in a very loose sense, the most intelligent on the planet, and the rest are just, creatures, animals, protozoa, whatever, right? And in this land, you get the feeling that, well, dragons are the primary species. And yeah, there's other creatures and animals, but none so intelligent and sophisticated as these dragons. And so there are parallels, but they're always talking about things that like go beyond the terrestrial, if you will, Michael, right? So like they're very spiritual. And this also really accounts for that paladin like guy. He's always like calling out to fallen heroes. There's this, I'll just quickly say this, and again, I don't want to belabor it, but hey, we're doing these interviews. There's one dragon in the beginning of the story that she's dead right from the beginning, but they keep mentioning her all the time. It's sort of like, oh, she was a great heroine, an old gold, well, not old anymore, but she's long dead. Altaia, who's a long dead gold dragon, and she was the sort of matriarch of the castle, the hero's castle, and the patriarch is still alive, and he's Leijimoto. And by the way, the name Leijimoto is sort of a shout out to none other than Leiji Matsumoto, who was the creator of Star Blazers Yamato, Galaxy 999 and Captain Harlock.
Yeah,
He's
I love those homages with names. I do that too. I had to change a bunch of names, by the way, for copyright because I
oh
had mine is here on the planet. So when I wrote my first draft, I had brand names, I had scientist names, and then I came to the sudden realization, like, oh no, this is not good. So I
well,
tweaked all
homage
the
is good, but
names.
yeah, homage is good, but outright just saying, Luke Skywalker did, you'd be like, oh, come on, man. Like, it just doesn't look
I have
right.
a conference in Cancun at this casino or this physics conference. You know, they hold it there because why not? And I had all the top scientists. They're the string theorists, you know, the computational scientists. I mentioned them by name, and I actually described them physically. And I was like, no, this is probably a bad idea. So I changed all the names in funny kind of Thomas Pynchon ways, and that was a
Sure.
good time, you know.
Hey, I'll say this real quick, and this is a shout out to book 5, where, I mean, I'm not ruining anything for anyone. I'll at least say this, is there are some real composers of music in the real world, some of which I think may have passed away, but that's not the point here, is that I use their names, and they are, to a point, characters in book 5, but their names have been played with and rearranged, and it's as homage because you're like, oh, that's so cool. Like in this, it's relevant in this situation, but no one will recognize it unless they are super hyper, like have a certain knowledge of these composers because it's so, they're so obscure. It's not like Tchaikovsky, it's literally like you wouldn't know it, but it makes sense within the storytelling and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, I feel homages are really important, especially when it's those who have inspired you, those times where you go like it makes relevant sense. Like the reason I wanted this Leijimoto characters, I wanted you to get that feel like you're like, ooh, just the name alone, Leijimoto. You almost feel like it's even from Last Samurai, Katsumoto. Which Ken Watanabe got to play. What a great film that was and great role for him. But it gives you that feeling that, and he's the first character you meet in my books, Leijimoto, Elder Leijimoto, and you get that feeling that you're like, ooh, he does. He feels like the Japanese patriarch of this. Now, that said, you immediately also know, no, he's not Japanese. It's not on Earth. But you get a mental image of it without me having to say all these weird things. I just introduce him as Elder Leijimoto and that he's old. He's wearing these interesting spectacles. So it's like, ooh, they have glasses too. Like, yo, this dragon is need to correct their vision. What the hell?
Yeah,
Batman,
see
come
that
on.
those are the fun elements where you take a totally fantastic world that has no ostensible relationship to Earth, and then you add these little nuggets to connect it to
Yeah.
the most banal kind of observation here, and all of a sudden, because it's over there, it becomes exceptional and noteworthy and fun. It's infused
And
with reference, right?
and to quickly kind of to catapult off of that too is when I mentioned this glasses thing is, and by the way, that wasn't by accident. At one point, the glasses make a difference with the storytelling, even if arguably, again, without ruining anything, if someone says, "Oh, but that was so minor," I'm like, "Yeah, but it's like it was deliberate, right? I could have not done that and done it differently, but why I introduced X and then this and Y and Z is for good reason. If I introduce,
Within that kind of brings together everything we've been talking about, which is world building, plot, character, right? References and relevance, and what makes good storytelling in terms of nothing being wasted and always using everything that you offer up.
Yeah, like look, Michael, I'm gonna just tell you straight up here, and I'll tell the audience the same thing. And however they feel, if I feel brazen when I say it, this is 30 plus years of experience. Is like, I'm not f***ing around here. I'm literally trying to employ these techniques and kind of stylistic choices that all echo what real storytelling is about. And for me, the biggest major one is really setups and payoffs. If you see something coming into the frame in the sense of the storytelling it's unfolding, you might look at it and go like, I wonder if this is going to be important later on. And it's like, you can almost bet it will be. Now, when it pays off is up to me. And obviously, I find the most I don't necessarily want to say the most logical place because that may not be the one I choose. I find the correct dramatic place to pay it off. And in some cases, as I said before, not to reiterate, but I mean, there's some things that I deliberately set up when I was writing DD1 in 2021, and this is the screenplay version I did in 2019. But anyway, there's things I purposely set up in DD1 that echo all the way into 6. Like, you gotta wait. And in some cases, very subtle. You don't need to know that. And it's just a quick paragraph, nothing. And then suddenly you will see it and be like, oh, what? That's sick. Yo, that one thing. Oh my God, I didn't even think of that. That's awesome. Or there may be other ones that I purposely really want you to see, so I keep it fresh in your mind and then pay it off. And you're like,
is your
ooh.
screenplay just the first book, or was it
Yeah.
expansive over? So it's just the first book in your screenplay.
Well, I should, at least to make this clear, the first screenplay I wrote in over 2018 and 2019, and that was kind of like I was kind of building up momentum and things and stuff, blah, 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 blah. I won't go into all the other details, but like I also did the screenplay versions of the other ones, but I didn't make a thing of that publicly or whatever. I just doing the books now at this point. But
Well, the
yeah,
reason I'm asking is because my the Super Santa book that I mentioned, the illustrated holiday satire, which is that big monster book, broke it into 3. That started as a screenplay way back in 2008,
awesome.
2009. And I did it with my illustrator friend who ended up collaborating on the story as it unfolded. I did all the writing, he did the illustration, and
That's
he would
awesome.
FaceTime me and we would riff on scenes. So adapting a screenplay into a novel was actually, it was a little bit laborious, but it was fun in the sense that a screenplay, in a sense, is a storyboard because you have a
Yes,
scene,
I
you
agree.
describe what's happening, and it's all action based and dialogue based.
Mm-hmm.
So in a sense, you've got the outline of the book prepared for you, and then you fill it in with the glorious prose, and then it has a way of taking on a life of its own. Did you experience something similar?
I couldn't agree more, Michael. In fact, it's ironic that you mentioned this because I've mentioned this on many occasions with other people. And a lot of times I will at least say this is that many people often disagree with me on this. I don't know why. And let me explain. So when I first approached writing a screenplay, a lot of people approach us and, Matthew, what the hell are you doing? And I'm like, well, here it comes. And they're like, you know what you should do? I'm like, here it comes. You should write a book. And da 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 da. And I'm like, look, just have you written a book before? I'm like, well, no. I'm like, okay, well, have you even like edited a book or done something? Well, no. And I'm like, have you done a cover design? No. And I'm like, well, pardon my French, but maybe you should shut up right now. I mean, I'm trying to be not rude about it, but it's like, you shouldn't tell people what to do when you're not speaking from a place of experience. And I'm like, let me just say this and I'll go on about my way and you can go about yours. Is I'm like, writing a screenplay is significantly easier, though not an easy task, but significantly easier than crafting a book. And the reason is the screenplay is more like a skeletal structure, whereas the book is going to have the flesh and the sinew and the veins
Yeah,
and
this goes. I mean, if you know it, if you know, right? Which is it's like I'm giving you a Homer Simpson like duh, which is like 100%, because that's the essence of what a screenplay is, and this is why a lot of people, even and especially in Hollywood, don't know how to read screenplays because they don't get enough for their little heads to wrap around exactly what the hell's going on. They can't visualize it. They can't go with just the characters in this scene, they do this, they say that, next scene. They can't handle it. So no one really knows what the hell a screenplay is most of the time.
is because again it's simple. It's like if someone were to say, look, I've read poetry and tons of it before, I've never read a screenplay, so I'm going to go read a screenplay and it's going to be fine and I don't have to do any like pre-homework or whatever. Like, no, that's not true. Just like if someone said, well, I read a book before, what's the difference between a book and a screenplay? I'm like, well, a lot. To start with.
I'm going to be like the fairy godmother in Shrek 2 and say, use your imagination. And that's something a lot of people don't know how to tap into. There's nothing going on creatively. They're like, this is not what I'm used to. So it sucks.
So it's like the same thing with being trained for an actor who's trained for television and an actor who's trained for the stage. It's there's a that mathematical thing where they show that people can't see my hands here, but it's the union, the two circles that are
The
interlapping.
Venn
When we
diagram.
talk about acting, there is there's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 circles, and there are interlapping things. But if someone were to say, yo, I acted on TV, therefore I should be able to act on theater, right? I'd be like, well, I mean, maybe, but did you know you should do some studying because this, the camera here, and this shot and that shot, wide angle, blah, blah, blah. So there's all sorts of different things. And I feel that, yes, for someone who's reading a screenplay, if they are reading a screenplay, which again is rare, it would only be mostly industry professionals who are going to read a screenplay. Well, and why would they, right? Because, right, that the idea of reading a screenplay is sort of foreign in the sense that you almost wouldn't read a technical manual to your laptop. You just use your laptop or whatever. Just like when people watch a movie, no one says, "Oh, well, I read the screenplay first," you know. Well, that's what I mean is most well, no, I know what you're saying, Michael, but what I'm saying is if we were to say, take a poll of 1,000 people who are not involved in production, they would almost never say, yeah, I read the screenplay to Dances with Wolves and then I saw the film, or even reverse. I saw Dances with Wolves. I was so impressed. I read the screenplay, blah, 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 blah. But anyway, and that goes on to other things that I often mention with exercises. I often would tell people to, if they wanted to learn about screenwriting, I'd be like, here's an idea. And I'm kind of transitioning here, but why not? It's a good piece of information for people out there, and you might find it interesting yourself. If people are like, I don't know that much about writing a screenplay, I would like to know more. I'm like, here's one idea right out of the box that you can viscerally just kick your butt. Pull up a scene from one of your favorite films, whether it's, I don't know, Last Samurai, Star, whatever. Just a scene, please. Don't bring up the whole film. Right? You can, but the point is pick a scene where it has a beginning, middle, and end, and you will know that's usually up someone posted on YouTube, and you can tell. While that action's playing out, pause it, and then what you have seen, see if you can at least write something akin to the directions. So in some case, you're going to have the sort of stage directions, right? You're going to put in interior, exterior. You're going to say day, night, whatever. Then you're going to say Luke and put the line. And then, oh, what does he do? Oh, you see that he's in a stormtrooper outfit. You should probably mention that, and that he's not wearing a helmet. But that's it. Don't get into detail. Just describe briefly those things. Now, what does he do? He walk over to the control console and starts popping up some buttons and picks up a microphone. Copy that. Write that shit into the direction. And then he says, blah, 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 echo base to echo 7 or whatever. Finish writing your scene. Okay. Once you're kind of done and you've kind of gone through the scene and and you've tried to trim it down and be like, I've got it like pretty good and I didn't over detail. I didn't now go see if you can download the real screenplay, possibly the shooting script, I don't know, or maybe just the spec script, like the one that was not with all the camera directions, and just see how you fit in to that. Like, how well did you do? Did you kind of fuck up and overwrite in one area here? Did you miss this detail which they placed in it? Just contrast and compare and contrast, whatever you want to do. And maybe try that with more than one scene over, I don't know, a course of a month or two. And I'd be like, immediately you'll get better. Now, granted, you should pick some screenplays that are actually, good and written by good.
There's a lot of screenplays, a lot of professional screenplays that break
Well,
all the rules.
pick
They got
Dances
like
with Wolves.
five pages of backstory on the character, which
Well,
is like,
and then my
you know,
point is, right, pick
yeah.
good screenplay. Also, pick ones that are not quite super fringe where you're like, well, this was a really advanced director and they put it. The point is like, just, go get what do you call it? Follow the Yellow Brick Road. What is that? That's Wizard of Oz. Grab that one and see what does it look like. I mean, you could get 12 Angry Men if you're like, I'd like to get one that's more expositional. And I'm like, that's fine, but you just understand it's coming straight from the book. And I want to do Inherit the Wind. I'm like, great, that's great. The point is, this is a good lesson for people to realize, oh, I see. So it's stripped down to the nitty gritty and the most important, integral pieces that must be there. And all the other stuff is possibly
Yeah, and
window
the
dressing.
same rules apply in reverse too. So, for example, if you want to repurpose your novel into a graphic novel, then it happens in reverse. You
Right.
take your meaty world full of characters and descriptions and dialogue, and then you break it into a storyboard.
Sure.
And then you have one central uninflected image that represents that moment in that scene that's relevant. And then you have some sparse dialogue in boxes. And then
Oh
you go
yeah.
right to the next box in the storyboard, and the entire action is propelled forward, box, 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 box. And in ways like screenplay to novel, you take the outline and you build it up. And novel to graphic novel, you break it back down again. And that's
Yeah.
kind of interesting.
Yeah, and that brings up a point for me, which I don't know if I've mentioned in any of my interviews yet, because nobody really asked, but I'll mention it here because it's relevant. Is the illustrations? Is that the illustrations that I create? They always have a purpose, and they're always telling a story in and of themselves, independent in a way of everything. Like in other words, if you were to say, "I just want to see the illustration on page 56," I'm like, "Oh, bring it up." People will be like, "Whoa!" Immediately, they should get some kind of like feel. Is this a, oh my God, they're under attack? And you're like, Rod, it seems pretty clear, or you're like, it's never so much as something banal and overly fluffy as this is just a pretty picture of the main character and that's all. You'd be like, oh, interesting. So there's more to all your illustrations. I'm like, you bet your ass there is. In fact,
Well,
in
that
mine,
makes an illustration relevant, right? It's got to
but
capture the essence of what's going on.
I'll add this, and this will be only to people who are paying attention to some of these interviews, Michael. Is I've hidden a lot of secrets in all of my maybe not all of my illustrations, but
We got
I'd say
Easter eggs in there, right?
you
Yeah.
bet your bottom dollar. And this is not by accident. If people find stuff in there, which I've already had that readers that send it, hey Matthew, I saw this thing and blah, 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 and you couldn't possibly have done this on purpose, could you? And I'm like, that is interesting, isn't it? And that's all I say
Yeah,
sometimes.
I love that. I love that. And for my illustrated novel with my collaborator, we tried to capture the essence of the scene in a way that there was that uninflected image, and then each image had to capture some action. It wasn't
Oh,
just two characters standing in a room, right? There was things happen. Things happen. So you give dimensionality to every illustration. You imbue it with a multiple dimension of timing and action and drama to make it pop, right?
is one thing to like, for example, I'm pretty tame in the beginning of Diamond Dragons 1 deliberately because I'm like, I got to introduce some of these characters. And so having an image of some of them will be helpful. And at that time, I didn't have images of all the characters, and I still don't. I don't have that luxury. But that said, is there some times where I'm like, I'm just introducing Artemis here. So let's see an image of him. I'm just introducing Legimoto here. So let's get an image of him. But there's more to just the times where you just see their face and they're just like, oh, there's more to it than just that alone in the images. And this certainly echoes even harder as we go to book 2 and book 3 and book 4 and so on. But yeah, like it's a multifaceted process. And again, I'm not sure what your audience is like out there, but I hope they've learned something, and also like find some of
Yeah,
this
the whole point of
intriguing.
the science fiction and fantasy factory is to get a tour of the floor, meet people, meet authors, creators, artists, videographers just like you, to look under the hood, see how it's made, look how the sausage is made, and what the secret sauce is in the creative process. So this is a wonderful conversation. And on that note, have you thought about, I'm sure you have, repurposing the Diamond Dragons into graphic novel format, movies, etc.?
That's obviously, I could go on for miles with that kind of stuff. Is that so I will at least share this, is there I commissioned some composers to work with me on. I mean, I'm the one who developed the primary theme of Diamond Dragons, which is just a sort of a 12-note 4-bar kind of riff. I won't go into all the details, but like there's original music made for Diamond Dragons. We have some vocal work that I've not only done myself, but brought aboard, some female artists to voice certain characters.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're a big part of the way there already, right? In terms of
Well,
crafting.
what am I getting at with this is that, like, there's a lot more to Diamond Dragons the series than simply text on a page or even the cover designs themselves, which I pretty much do all of those, and even the illustrations. It's definitely a universe, and arguably it would probably behoove the whole series to it better fits the idea of being films than in a way than it does being books. But that said, as we're both probably painfully aware, even though everybody wants to pretend like, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And like, look, the filmmaking process alone, if you were just doing something with real, regular humans and saying, it's a couple of white chicks sitting around talking in a cafe, or it's a couple of white dudes sitting around in Italian restaurant B going, hey, yo, whoa, whoa, is hard enough to film it. The idea of doing Diamond Dragons is a monumental task that would take millions and millions of
Well,
dollars.
let me bring up the
And that's crazy.
buzzword, which is AI.
No, and that would be my answer to it. Is just like I'm just not. I'm not. It's not my. I think this is the wrong path for a dozen reasons, and that's for me. I'm not going to tell other people how to do it. I even have a page on my website that's dedicated to saying, look, there's no artificial intelligence. Yeah,
Well, there's no AI in my Santa book, but
cool.
at the same time, you're bringing. I did a quickie website for my new novel, and since my illustrator friend didn't collaborate with me, I'm not an illustrator. So
Sure.
frankly, I whipped up my characters on Chat GPT, and I
Mhm.
used the face of a friend of mine who had passed away as kind of an homage, and he
Mhm.
became my main character's face. And I prompted with descriptions from my book, and I did several iterations.
Does he look a little like William Defoe? I mean, yeah, I think because I saw, I visited your
That's
website.
Tom. That's my friend
Interesting.
Tom. It's literally his face. And he
Mhm.
he he passed away young, and I wanted to bring him back.
I'm sorry to
So I
hear
thought
that.
that
Yeah.
that would be a great homage. It's like the character is more me, but the
Mhm.
body type and face. Tom had Marfan syndrome, which is a genetic disorder similar to what Abraham Lincoln had. So Tom
Oh,
was abnormally tall and skinny, and he had all these comorbidities associated with
oh,
it. So I brought him back with AI, and my other characters, the scientist is a non-binary African American, and she's
uh-huh.
got a they've got a huge afro, and they've got all their instruments in the afros, so they take out like a spectrometer and juice around with it and put it back in the afro. So I created them. I created some of the aliens, and I popped it up. It took me a half hour to create my cast, and it's obviously AI. So there's no pretension here, and I didn't use AI to write my book. It's all me typing. But but the reason I bring it up is just what you said. You're an independent artist. Okay. You're
Right.
in the indie writer artist category, right? You
Mhm.
don't have a big publisher backing you. You
No.
don't have a marketing and PR engine behind you. You're out there hustling, and you don't have $5 million to lay down as executive producer of your own pilot. You don't have it. So AI now, with everything from Mid Journey to some of the newer ones, it's almost to the point where I could take my book and make a graphic novel out of it and still be pretty good. It'll still be
Right.
obviously AI, and actual graphic artists are going to hate me because I didn't hire them. But I don't have
Right.
the money either. And I would love to see my book come to life in different. You just brought it up. It's got
Mhm.
life outside the page, and I would love to
Well,
see it
and that's
come to
why,
life that
Michael,
way.
from my perspective, what I would like, and this is just part of the idea of, yeah, I have to try to continue to get this stuff out there, is that if I do run into the right people, if I'm not trying to say that it's going to magically happen, but it's like, I'm not trying to say, yo, we're sitting on a gold mine here, buddies, but I've got some possibilities that I might try to pursue. And again, a lot of these are just, I don't want to say long shots, but in a way they are. But the point is to literally approach the right people and say, look, I mean, it's pretty obvious that if I were to do this alone, it will not work, and no one can do these kinds of things alone. However, given the work I have already done alone, must give us pause and should give us pause and should show people that, holy shit, this guy knows what he's doing. This guy could probably direct this project given the correct resources and personnel and the right marketing and the right tools and da, da, da. And from my perspective, Michael, would be like, yes, please, let us please hire 24 different individuals whatever, however many number and whatever, and let's work on these things. Let us put money in people's pockets to do something that's inspiring and beautiful and interesting, and something that could change, not necessarily change the world, but like at least be like, holy cow, have you guys seen the Diamond Dragons one film? It's a brilliant hero's journey, and my God, I left the theater going like, what the hell, that's so amazing. Like, what is my life like? I'm rethinking so many things because it's so impactful, like the Matrix and Star Wars and Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. And it's like, I look at it like, wouldn't it be better to hire human beings rather than throw it into these kinds of engines? And I don't want to say cheapen it necessarily, but in the sense that it's like, it's so much more fun and to be like, yo, this is, I'll just make up a name, right? This is Sophia. She's our lead artist on the project, and then she's leading the whole team. And this is Madeline. She's doing the animations. Okay, so these are some great artists, and you got it. And this is my composer, or these are the team of, like, how much
Yeah,
cooler.
I mean, what you're discussing is really the holy grail of every indie artist, right? That you air quote get discovered, and you get
Well,
discovered based on your own merit, the merit of your content, right? And I dig it, but it's
yeah,
just tough. So the only reason I brought up AI isn't like an end state. It's not like the AI graphic novel that I'm proposing. It's not the
mhm.
be all end all graphic novel for my book. But I just see it as a way of I'm a bald guy. I live in Orange County, California right now. I moved from New York, and
Oh,
I'm DIY. I got my $70 microphone here for podcasts, and I'm on the app, right? And I rant on TikTok. I blog on Medium, right? I self-publish on Amazon,
yeah,
and then I got all this stuff going on. I'm pumping it out.
sure.
And my goal would be to have somebody notice with coins who would back me, who would back my vision. And when it comes to my science fiction novel, I have Identical Dreams to You, which is based on the raw merits of my content. I want someone to take a look at the book, read it, and go, OMG, I want to make this. But that's a tough lift because my book is 120,000 words, and it'll take anyone from 8 to 10 hours with average reading time to actually digest it. That's a
I think
big
it could take
ask.
longer than that, depending on the person, and
But
that's good.
if I could create an awesome graphic novel or even a AI video short, which someone can consume in 10 minutes and blow their pants off, then I could use that as a marketing technique to get the attention of someone who might conceivably say, "Oh my God, I wanna make your shit."
I
That's just me. I'm like, and I'm not quite sure, how to actually go about every step of that. But I see AI as a way where you have independent artists, indie artists, especially in science fiction and fantasy, where in AI you could create anything. Okay.
Right,
I've got a space station that's orbiting a magnetar and sucking the energy out of it, and a
right.
spider alien has created a simulator that could reproduce anything imaginable in a jar, okay,
Yeah.
using all that energy. Now, to draw it is okay, but to make a photorealistic video of this space station and the spider and the
Hmm.
jar, and inside the jar my bad guy hacks into it and she appears, that's cool, right? That could get some attention. I can't do that in an FX studio for under what, like 50 grand just to make that one scene. But I could get on Midjourney and try to crank it out in a Sunday afternoon.
Well, and that's what I mean is everybody has their own paths on how they want to go about things. And I will
Yeah,
just
I'm
say
just saying
this.
that my version of AI is a vehicle for indie artists to potentially repurpose their content in a way that's
Yeah,
affordable and that can maybe convey the awesomeness of their content.
right. What I will also say this, Michael, and I'm not trying to say anything like I appreciate having the discussion. It's good for people to be on different sides of things or whatever, but
Yeah,
also
I love our disagreements more than our agreements, frankly, because that makes for
it,
an interesting conversation.
it does, and it's better than
Yeah.
it being contentious and being people about that. It's just not about it. But let me at least say this: is that let's go back in time. Let's go to the '60s or the '50s or the '70s. It doesn't matter. We'll just go before CGI. We'll just do that. At some point, someone read The Wizard of Oz and said, well, we can do this thing and this can be a movie. And so they didn't have those tools and they said, we're going to do it anyway and we're going to put up the funds. So apparently the book was enough and so on and so forth. And even Shakespeare's work has been made in so many forms, Much Ado About Nothing, which, by the way, I'm proud to say that I did some choreography for. The
Yeah, I
Fight
saw
Club.
that on your website. You were all
Yeah.
Shakespearean about that stuff.
Oh,
That's cool.
yeah, it's a lot of fun stuff. But my
Yeah.
point being is, what am I talking about? I'm just saying is that when and if the correct people are able to see X and Y and Z, it's not the field of dreams thing because it's a little too pie in the sky to say if you build it, they will come. But I feel that again, this is only talking about my perspective. So I'm not trying to say this is the end all be all. I'm just saying mine is I now currently have created enough materials. I've currently created enough video illustrations, books, which are just, they exist. They are real. They are not pie in the sky ideas or anything like this. The original music, which I've sometimes done in conjunction with my composers, or I've just said, hey, go on with your bad self and you know what to do. And we got blah, blah. And they come with these beautiful themes, which I haven't even released a lot of them yet because I don't want to. I don't want to put them into the atmosphere until it's time or whatever. But my point being is there exists enough materials with Diamond Dragons that if some millionaire or billionaire out there goes like, holy cow, this is some potential, and if for no other reason I want to see it on screen and I have the capabilities, and even if I put blah $1 million in, I don't care if I ever see it again because I am a millionaire and blah blah, blah. I don't care, let's do it. I'm like, I think you're making a good decision is what I would tell that person because I'm like, you're not looking at some jackass, pardon my French, who's like, oh, I have a year, I wrote a screenplay. I'd be like, yo, I've been doing my stuff for 30 plus years. I might have learned a few things during those decades. So it's like
Yeah.
at the
No,
very
I'm
least,
with you, and I'm very sympathetic to your optimism. I tend to be more pessimistic isn't so much the word, and I guess I could say realistic just because it fits my own damn opinion. And I think people are too busy now. Back in Shakespeare's time, back when when he wrote Wizard of Oz,
right.
there were just books. There were just newspapers. That
Mhm.
was it. And the amount of time and effort people spent consuming content was way more limited and fragmented. Now people check their phone 500 times a day. They're wired for sound. And I do clips on TikTok, okay? I rant, I have political opinions, cultural opinions. 95% don't make it past 5, 10, 15 seconds. And then they're commenting. They're telling me to go F myself after listening to 5, 10 seconds of my video. They just decide that I'm either on one side or the other based on 5, 10 seconds. And they go for it, and then they're on to the other thing.
But
So
we would,
my
not to
challenge,
interject, but we wouldn't want those people anyways, right, Michael? Because you're like,
yeah,
you
but what
don't,
I'm saying
you don't
though
need
is
that
the
kind of
people
personality involved in your
who
work.
might OMG our content, the people who might potentially greenlight us, suffer from this same attention deficit disorder generally, I think.
And I would again
And
argue that I'm like, I don't want those people to board the project. I'm sorry. Like we need, I don't want to quote Bruce Lee on this, but the whole, we need emotional content, not anger.
it's the funnel. So
I know, but
just
I
to
would,
cap my perspective on this and my
yeah, but I believe
counterpoint
you.
for the sake of a robust dialogue,
Yeah,
if my book isn't enough, all right, which demands 10 hours of someone's time to really appreciate this, which is unheard of in the digital universe. And
right.
if my podcasting and my blogging and my video ranting aren't sufficient to get for some people to notice that I might have something interesting to say and that I created this gem of this hard science fiction multiverse book, then
Right.
I think my chances are better going from almost zero to a little bit better if I have a graphic novel and if I
Sure.
can actually maybe even do a video short, like a
Sure.
5-10 minute summation of the plot, like almost like a trailer. a trailer of the damn book,
You could
then I
probably
would go
hire
for it.
somebody.
Just because I don't think anyone gives a shit.
Well, I mean, look, Michael. Also, we're going on a not big tangent here too, but with the listeners and the viewers, it's like,
I think
Mark.
our listeners are interested just because, you know, we're at the science fiction fantasy factory, and if you
Right.
make something on the factory floor that's awesome and no one sees it, then it sucks. You know what I mean? And we created these things that are so awesome that could benefit the world, and it's so damn crowded. There's over 100,000 new books published every year. How are you going to cut through that?
Right. Well, I mean, let's get down to the nitty gritty with that one, which is, marketing is difficult, and it does require that in some cases, if you're not already a millionaire or billionaire or whatever, super rich something, and you don't have the coin, you don't have the connections, you don't have the clout, and you don't have the crews, and you don't have the computer code and all those other C words. I mean, it's gonna be tough. But that said, what I'm also trying to get at, Michael, is like I'm doing what I can with the resources that I have. And I also believe in the human component of it. I think it would be, from my perspective, I don't need to go any further with this stuff. Like, if it isn't enough at a certain point, then I'm like, then that's fine. And I'm okay with it to some
Yeah,
extent.
I'm not telling you what to do. I'm
Oh, no,
just
I'm not
merely
saying you are.
offering my perspective.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And what I'm saying is, just giving you back with mine is that, like, so I just look at it that, like, if the time comes and if I find the right people, which, again, I'm always trying to look for avenues or whatever. I don't think anybody should stop doing that. And it's not like I need to bust my back anymore to do such things. I'm already busting my back on my work. That's where I put all my effort into. But I'll still search. But the point is that there exists enough materials already. I haven't seen yours, so just understand that. But I'm almost starting to feel that it's like, it sounds like Michael has enough that if there was some intelligent investor or someone out there, that they would see this is enough to at least say, we can start the process and then see, and then decide, oh, no, no, thank you. Or yes, yes, let's go forward. It'd be one thing, Michael, if both of us had just barren nothing and like a book, all text, zero illustrations, nothing, weak cover designs, and that's it. And we've all seen that. 90% of books out there are simply that: text, not a very good cover, and it's skeletal nothingness, and that's
And the
fine. I'm not
content
trying to,
itself is unoriginal.
and I don't necessarily I'm not even trying to be angry at people or say that. I'm just
No,
simply
no,
saying is
it's
that,
just
like,
saying it's Sturgeon's law. 95% of all science fiction sucks, and that probably
right.
applies to most things, right?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
therefore, my point also being is you're hitting on exactly the right points here, is that so it is uncommon. And it's kind of funny. It relates to my book's title, The Diamond Dragons. It's like they're diamonds in the rough. Is if you, by its nature, a diamond is exceptionally rare, and it's going to be difficult to find that on a beach of sand. You're not going to find a diamond. So the real issue is you go like, I create the work, I do the things, and you may not survive to see if your work ever goes anywhere. Tolkien, for example, is a good example. Is that he, despite how people maybe think of it, and they go like, "Well, Tolkien's still, he's talked about and blah blah blah." I'm like, yeah, but he didn't live to see a lot of the quote unquote success that even the Rankin Bass animations. He was dead, I think, by that point, and if not dead somewhat earlier or
Yeah,
right after.
the movies based on his stuff sucked until Peter Jackson. They were bad.
Oh, right. Yeah, I mean, and arguably some people might say, "Oh, but Peter Jackson didn't do this and didn't do that." I'm like,
No,
"Yo,
but he did
can
a
you?"
great job. I think Tolkien himself would have been impressed.
I think he would have too, and especially
Yeah.
if we, not to super tangent with it, but it's true that, like, again, you can only fit so much into something when you go like, "Yo, we're doing this series of books, which arguably should be like, I don't know, I want to say 12 to 24 hours of material," and they're like, "Yeah, well, you only got three, buddy," and so you go, or three films, if you will. So you got to pick and choose at a certain point, or you get the luxury
And
to say,
that's the essence of Jackson's success, at least with The Lord of the Rings. He knew exactly how to take a novel and deconstruct it into a screenplay. We
I
were talking about this earlier. Peter Jackson and his editors did an awesome job
I think
with
there's
that.
evidence too that when you look at the behind the scenes, is that PJ was very open about all of it, especially with his team and in the Weta workshop and everything. Is that they're like, in a lot of cases we were just running into roadblocks, and we'd go right back to the books. Ian McKellen would always bring up the books, and we're all looking at this, and we would say, okay, can we do this? Well, and there's just literally just, I don't want to say hundreds of hours of footage, because it's not hundreds, but like there's dozens of hours of footage that they just didn't, they weren't included. And in a lot of cases, they tried probably scenes and they said, it doesn't work. We're not leaving it in. And this is just how it's done. And so arguably, at least PJ and team, if you will, Weta and everybody else, they put the work into it and whatnot. But anyway, getting back to this, and I got to get going pretty soon. Although I'm enjoying this, we can always.
I wanted to cap, and
Yeah.
I have one question too before we
Wait,
cap.
before you do that, I just want to say is that like it's a difficult process to take anything and transform it into a film, whether it's for a series or just one film alone. And in a lot of cases, it's beyond what people think. Is they'll think, oh, I saw the I read the book, and we always hear the book was better than the movie. I'm like, a lot of times it's because the budget was just prohibitive, and the director did the best they could given the circumstances, given the timeline, given
Oftentimes they made terrible mistakes adapting from the book to the screenplay because it's hard.
and not only that, don't forget there can always be executives saying, "No, I don't want it like that." My wife says she wants to see the elf and she wants to see the elf do this, and they're like, okay, Mr. Weinstein, no problem, we'll do that. And you're kind of like, dude, what happened? And a lot of times they'll blame the director, and a lot of times you'll see the director come out and say, I didn't do that, I didn't do the writing, they
Yeah,
gave
it's
me the
like
thing, I
it's
shot it
like
the way they told me to.
Fincher with Alien 3.
Oh,
Fincher
don't get
with
me started.
Alien
Yeah.
3 was like, "What did you do to my movie?"
And Fincher was like, you have no idea what I did. I didn't do it. The freaking executives, there was so many times Fincher was
That's
ready
a
to just.
famous example of the studio coming in and
And
torpedoing a very creative person's
and
vision.
yeah, and let's get this straight too. When you talk about the director of Gone Girl, not to mention with wonderful Rosamund Pike, don't even talk to me about if Fincher messed up Alien 3. You would know right away. Because you'd be like, yo, he did Gone Girl. I'm like, look at his body of work. You think he did Alien 3 and it was because of him that it screwed up? I think you need to recheck yourself. Yeah, right? But anyways, what's your last question? Then I gotta go.
Wonderful conversation. I appreciate your time.
Oh yes, as wait, really quick, right? As Ken Watanabe said, right? This has been a very good conversation. I have introduced myself. You have introduced yourself.
Thank you. I want to end though with one question for you. And it's totally related to what we were just talking about, and I think it's a great one. Let's say we've got the OMG mystery backer who's listening or watching, okay? And now we have our Andy Warhol 15 seconds. We got his or her or their ear, okay?
Mhm.
And we need to pitch them
Right.
the essential theme of our series, all right? And we only have like 10 seconds to do it. I'm going to go first because I
Go
saw
ahead.
a meme. I saw a meme just today as I'm doom scrolling. It was from Brian Cox, the science educator and physicist, and
I,
and
I,
uh, he's in a band. The guy's really cool. Yeah. Brian Cox is cool. Yeah.
yeah. He's very very frank and very he's been motivated, and it's funny you mentioned real quick, as I've seen this video where he
Who
said it's
doesn't love Brian? Everyone loves Brian Cox.
well, he came out and said, right, he came out and said, Michael, that he's like, it was time for me to realize that it's keeping everything in the background with science. It was time for me to come out and actually do
He had a
it.
quote, which is great. He goes,
Hmm?
the number one philosophical consideration for human beings is how to understand our finite mortal lives
Yeah,
within the context of an infinite, eternal, and recurring multiverse.
right.
Right? So that the heart of that is we are very limited. And there,
Of
if you
course.
believe in the multiverse, there might be an infinite copies of this podcast that we just did, an infinite variation. I'm wearing blue here. You might be wearing red instead of white. You know what I mean? It's all playing out. So if that's the case, then how do we find value in our individual lives if we're just so unbelievably redundant and therefore insignificant? And that to me is the essential theme of my own sci-fi series, that the characters are struggling with that existential crisis,
Mm-hmm.
and by their own actions are either going to fall victim to it or transcend it and realize their dreams. So that's
Yeah.
just my thing. That's my Brian Cox kind of pitch to this OMG guy
Yeah.
or gal or them listening. You got a whole pocket full of money and you want to give some to an indie creator. You're going to give it to Mookie Spitz because we love that thing. So I know I'm putting you a little bit on the spot with Diamond
Oh,
Dragons. How would you, it's got to be succinct like that, but
mhm.
how would you pitch it to this OMG big money person?
Well, first of all, before even addressing that, I would just quickly say is that interesting, because then there's some parallels between our work that we weren't probably aware of until you just now said that. At least I can be like, oh, interesting, because there's no way I could have necessarily captured that by just visiting your website, which I didn't have time to do for like 30 minutes. I went over there, looked at it for a few minutes, and went, okay, I'm getting an idea, and I got to go do this interview. But so no, no, no. I'm just saying is there's some parallels that I'm learning from you now that I was like, oh,
Right.
interesting. I wouldn't have known that. But in addition to that, I would say that if there were someone out there that was listening and saying, okay, this guy, what is he all about, and why is it, and why would I invest, and what, blah, blah, blah. First of all, I would have to say, like, yo, visit the website and look at some of those teaser videos that give.
Eh,
No,
I'm
no, no. Let
calling
me
you out.
finish,
You
Mike.
gotta
No,
tell the guy right now. Don't tell
no,
him to
no,
go visit your website.
no. Let me finish. Let me finish. I'm like,
That's not gonna work, buddy.
well, whether it works or not is
What's your
I don't
pitch?
care. I don't
What's your
care.
pitch?
Then I don't care. I wouldn't want to work with those people. I would say, look at if you look at some of that material, some of it just only take you 2 minutes to put the video, press play, and
Tell us
watch.
now. Tell this
I
guy or gal or
Well,
them.
you got to stop interrupting me so that I can do it. So it's like then there's the taglines to all the books, and if they look at them, they'll see that one in particular to the fourth book is reflection is key to unlock celestial mysteries beyond the void veil. What does that mean? It's like it's hinting to that maybe the terrestrial is not the sole limitation within this series. Now, arguably, someone might say, well, this is your dragon fantasy series. And I'm like, yeah, but perhaps there's parallels that we could draw with Earth. Again, to go back to Sagan's Contact, which again, a great book and a good movie as well. Zemeckis did fantastic, but like Jodie Foster's line as Ellie Arroway, what are we doing here? Like, what's it all mean? Like, don't you feel that it's worth one life to find out? Because there's a discussion that she's having when they're saying, look, you might never come back. Don't you why you're giving your life away for this? And she's like, don't you think it's worth one life to find out these secrets that are beyond us and all that stuff? I think it's worth it. And so, Michael, what I'm getting at is that those parallels seem to exist possibly between our work, only based on what you said. Like, I don't know your work, and you don't probably know anything about mine necessarily, but that is precisely what's going on in the series. And there's all sorts of weird thematic celestial underpinnings that I've woven into the fabric of my series. And to sum that all up at the end here, and I know you might say, oh, it's longer than 15 seconds. I'm like, I don't want the person who says you got to sum it up. And I'm like, that's like trying to say, sum up the legacy of, and fill in the blank of George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, whatever, in 15 seconds. I mean, you can't do that. That's just a stupid way of looking at the shit. If you're giving people a 15 seconds to sell something that is really this journey, this celestial journey, it's. I
You're
mean,
much
look, I
more
got.
demanding of your
Well, look at.
miracle investor.
No, not necessarily. Look at Michael. If they say I want to see a log line, I'm like, I got log lines for all of them. Here they are. If they say I want to see a teaser video for all of them, I'm like, look, I got them to all the books. Here they are. I want to see all the covers. I'm like, I don't know what's fucking stopping you. They're all right there. And if someone says, okay, I want to hear some voiceovers to tell me whether these characters are like, I'm like, ain't nobody stopping you from looking at that shit. It's on my site or my video channel or whatever. But if someone were to say, yeah, but I need to see it in 15 seconds, I'm like, well, you're not going to get that from 15. What are you, crazy? That'd be like saying, I want to have a healthy week's worth of meals in 15 seconds. I'm like, Good
Yeah,
luck with
I
that. That's
agree.
not
I
going to
agree
happen.
with you in principle as an artist and an author, but I'm just realistic that I don't think anyone's going to give me more than 15 seconds. It's like the Andy Warhol 15 seconds.
Look, I don't want to work with you then, is what I would say to those people. And they might take offense. Yeah. And I would say, look, that's fine. I mean, here's the point is I need
So
someone more
thanks
like,
you for your time, Matthew. It's been an awesome, wild conversation, and I don't think
yeah,
there was a dull moment in
no,
our whole
not at
time.
all.
So we're gonna leave links to. You just mentioned all your goodies on your website. We're gonna leave links, okay? So if you're an OMG investor who can't wait to give Matthew $20 million to bring Diamond Dragons to life, or you are a science fiction and fantasy fan who wants some great content where this guy does it all. He writes, he edits, he does the illustrations, he's got videos, he does voiceovers. He also does backflips and stuff. Go check
I
out
used to.
his website. And we'll leave all the links and descriptions there. And we are going to, this is, if you're hearing this, then this is the audio. And Matthew is going to work his wonders on a video version of this. So
I
if
hope
you're
so.
seeing it on video, then you've already been blown away by his masterful cinematography skills. And if you're listening to the audio, then be on the lookout. We're going to have the video version up soon too. Like, comment, share. Thank you for joining us at the Science Fiction and Fantasy Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Michael. I appreciate it. And again, I just invite people, email me,
Yeah, we can put that in there too. Although, watch out for spam bots. Put in your little filter. Take care.
Feel free to contact me. I'm just another artist like y'all out there.
Yeah,
And
yeah, you're very accessible. So that's
yeah,
it. If you want to
say
talk to
hello.
Matthew directly, just ping him up. And you can ping me up too. There'll be a link at the bottom of the podcast. You can reach it out directly to me. Thanks again, Matthew.
Thank you. Appreciate
Diamonds are forever, and so are your dragons.
I appreciate the opportunity. It was a lot of fun. And again, there can always be other conversations for another time.
We can bring you back too for book 6. You can have 6, right? Isn't there 6 planned?
Yeah, well, I don't want to continue on things, but yeah, like I'm developing 6, and for sure, my goal is to release that on the winter solstice of 2026, and probably close out the series. But it's possible that I might entertain the idea of doing DD7 and DD8. We will see, but I won't promise those until I'm sure.
Great. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.